Hey, folks. What's today? Thursday. All right. I made it, y'all. I was about to push this back. Let me grab one thing and then we're going to start. Get that real quick. All right. Actually, I'll just grab it later. Just in case I need to use this for later. Okay. Happy Thursday. Can you guys hear me? If you hear some random noise in the background, that is just the air conditioner. All right. Boom, boom, boom. All right. How's my chat doing? Chat is live. Perfect. Okay. Sorry. It's been like a long day. So I'm like adjusting, trying to get stuff right. So I didn't get enough time to do everything that I needed to do. Okay. Let me read a few comments and then we'll just jump right into this. By the way, I missed the gym today because I did not get enough time to prep for my live and do the gym. So I don't have my happy endorphins to make me feel good while I do the live, but that's okay. Anyway, let me get in some quick shout outs to folks that are on here. What's up, Black Queen, Deanna Penna, Jay, Angela Crawley, Weezy Jefferson, Courtney Henderson, Satino Palazzo, what's up? AC, The Moorland. If I miss you, please forgive me. I'm just scrolling real quick. Let me see. Oh, look, Rainy J said, I'm listening with one eye open past my bedtime. I understand. I'm going to bed as soon as this is over. Let me see. What up? Me, YJ, Dina Newton, what up? Kira 34. Let's see. All right, let's vent about our problem, Cal. JK12. Yeah, I got a whole lot of venting to do, to be honest. Like, I'm trying to get this adjustment thing set up. All right. Let's see. Hey. Let me see. Brittany said, I was just looking for something to watch while I cook dinner. Yay. Shout out from Houston. All right, Houston. I plan to, at some point, come out that way. I've never been to Houston, minus, like, the airport. But there's a lot of people I know in Houston that are always like, hey, when you coming this way? And I just have never made plans. So Houston will be a thing at some point. What up, Avocado Queen? I feel like y'all all just saw me, like, 3 days ago with the last live. And here we are again. Soulflow said, last podcast was dope. Listen 4 times. All right. Well, I think this next one is a lot better than that one. I love that one, though. Actually, to be honest, I think I'm going to love every episode of this specific series I'm doing about my experience with the kids just because there's just so many funny stories. The hardest part has been picking which parts just can't make the podcast episode because the episode would be 5 days long. There's just so many different stories. And the challenge I run into, even though I have changed the name of every person featured, there are still people that are around that I sometimes reference in the podcast. So I'm trying to not tell certain stories because I don't need certain things to get out with certain folks. It's a whole mess. Like, think of I don't know, did you guys ever watch Orange is the New Black? And when Piper I guess she had wrote like some kind of blog or something, or some kind of podcast or something they had where she was talking about her experience in the jail. And then she didn't realize people in the jail were going to be listening, and she done talked about everybody up in there. But fortunately, my stories are like, it's happy stuff. It's just stuff you can laugh at. And the good thing is, these stories are from like 10 years ago. So all those episodes that we're listening to now, as far as my work with the kids so far, those stories are from 2011 and 2012. The one that's coming out this Sunday night is kind of the 2012 and a portion of 2013. So it's like 10 years ago. So, I mean, at this point, they're not even kids. These folks are grown. But, you can't tell everything. But I'm excited. Simone T said, going to the gym at night is crazy, Calvin. See, I go at night because no one's in there. Like, I don't like going during the day because then you got to deal with the muscle heads that are going to be in there, and they're going to do the supersets where they hog like 5 machines for like 50 minutes. And mind you, they don't be doing no working out. They be sitting on the machine on their phone the whole time, just be sitting there. And I'm just like, let me just borrow the machine for like 5 minutes, because I just be working them machines and rotating, and they want to sit here and hold the machines hostage, just living all up in there all day. I'm like, dang, wrap it up. But I like going at night because there's nobody in there. So you have more access to the machines. I don't have to worry about feeling intimidated by the muscle heads that are going to be in there grunting and growling and whatever else they got. I ain't trying to be around that. So I just like to have my music and be in my zone. But plus, I think it kind of gives me a second wind at night, because at night is when I'm normally working on other things. If I'm not doing like YouTube like I am now, I'm working on a bunch of other stuff that I need to hurry up and put out. So going to the gym at like 8 or 9 o'clock pretty much gives me some energy to make it to midnight, so I'm not crashing by 10:45. We got to start soon. I'm just giving y'all a minute to get in here. Poison Ivy, y'all going to see Tony? One of my good friends just got tickets, and I hope we're going. They just got got tickets like yesterday. So happy to go to that. And it's crazy. We just saw Tony in September, but it wasn't the Raphael Sadiq and Dwayne Wiggins in them lineup. It was a different lineup with, some of the original members and a bunch of other folks. It was still a good show, but, I want to see the real thing. That's one of my favorite groups, one of my favorite Tony songs. I couldn't keep it to myself. I play that song so much. Lay Your Head on My Pillow. And the dopest part is on that Sons of Soul album. Those songs come right back to back. I think it goes Slow Line, Lay Your Head on My Pillow. I couldn't keep it to myself. Like that whole part, I'd be jamming. Lil I3D said, "What's up? I'll be listening to you while at work." I appreciate it. Just don't be getting fired listening to me, y'all. All right. We have to start. I'm going to try to get through all of these topics. I don't like when I don't have my notes 100% where I want them to be. So some of these subjects I might bypass on because I would rather make sure I know what I'm talking about before I just get on here and ramble. But we still have some good ones in here. Course correction. Hi, Calvin. Your boss worked my nerves. I don't even know her. Oh, and the stories get crazier in that podcast. They get even crazier. This is like light work right now. The first year, as chaotic as it was, you don't even see the nonsense that comes out with some of the people. But it's all in fun. It's all in fun. Love that color on you. Thanks. Look, I think it just goes good with the couch. Y'all see, I got some new couch. I'm about to get rid of that artwork back there. That's gonna go in my bedroom. I'm gonna put something else up there. But yeah, I didn't even get a chance to really change after work either. All right, we got to keep going. All right, I thank y'all for all of these wonderful compliments. Oh my God, I love your content. It helped me get through a lot of late night study sessions in college. I just graduated, by the way. Congratulations. Where'd you go to school? Icho the Awesome. All right, I'll tell you the story about this couch another time, or maybe later in the podcast. Okay, let's just jump into a few things. Thing one. I know depending on where you live, the air outside is terrible. I know in DC, again, we got like a second wave of all that smoke from the Canada fires. Like yesterday was pretty terrible. Today was even worse. And the interesting thing, they tell you to not really do any strenuous exercise outside. They tell you to, wear a mask if you have to be outside, because the air quality today was really bad. It wasn't as bad as that first wave we had a few weeks ago where the air quality rating thing was like a 365 at one point. We were like cold purple out here. I think today was like a cold red. But it's interesting because even after people are told all of these different things and what not to do, I looked outside. I'm watching people go for their morning jog. Mind you, it looks like The Fog outside. Remember the movie The Fog? Like, it's looking just like that outside. I'm watching people go out here and run for marathons. And mind you, it's hot. Like, it's 80, 90 degrees today. I'm like, y'all just, all right. Listen, all I'm going to say is your body stuff catches up with you later down the line. There's no telling what kind of little toxins and stuff we're inhaling. All right. Just think, if smoke can travel all the way from Canada to DC and Virginia and Philly and New York and Chicago and all these places, and it's thick enough to travel and make it here, just think of all the contents that are in that smoke. Anyway, people still out there just gonna do what they want to do. And then it was interesting, like watching people like sit out on the stoop and then still smoke their cigarette outside in the smoke. I was like, look, I ain't judging, but all right, do you? So I'll say, I'm not one to judge, but very interesting. So folks, stay safe out there. I feel bad for the people that have to run like summer camps and stuff, because a lot of pools today closed in the area. It's like outdoor pools, stuff like that. And understand, if you've worked with children before, there's nothing worse than having a field trip scheduled for like an outdoor park or a pool or just some kind of recreation that's outdoors and you have to cancel. Oh, and if you didn't have anything planned as a plan B, like just, God bless those of you who are running summer camps. All right. And other lighter news before I get to the heavy stuff. Okay, Wheel of Fortune. Pat Sajack is out. I had no idea Pat Sajack was like half loony. I didn't know this at all. I'm a little disappointed. I feel like Pat Sajack was always somebody you just saw on TV at 7 o'clock right before Alex tripped back on Jeopardy. And now it turns out Pat's a whole QAnon, Trumpian everything. I was like, dang, all right, well, whatever. But anyway, they are planning to replace Pat Sajack with Ryan Seacrest. My only question is like, do y'all not have anybody else? Like, y'all use Ryan Seacrest, Nick Cannon, and Steve Harvey for everything. And it's nothing against what they do. But all I'm saying is that there are other people out there. It's like y'all use Ryan Seacrest and them like parsley. Just sprinkle them on everything. And you know what? I'm sure what's going to end up happening too. They're going to push Vanna out of there. Like when Vanna leaves, I bet you they won't replace her. And most likely what they'll do, everything will just be automated. Like I see it coming already. Like watch, we shall find out. But Wheel of Fortune is also one of my guilty pleasures if it ain't Jeopardy. Like I said before, like the last thing I've really been like glued into was Showtime at the Apollo. I'm obsessed with it right now. I've been watching every episode when it comes on just because. And I don't know if it's a nostalgia thing and just remembering the episodes being on TV when I was little, and it's kind of like, oh, reliving your childhood. I don't know, but I'm hooked to Showtime at the Apollo right now. In addition to that, like I said, for the book club, we will do our last session on the Phyllis Hyman book on Monday the 3rd. I did not get a chance to do it this week just because I was a little burnt out. Too much was on my plate, and we just did it live anyway. So, and I also didn't get a chance to put the announcement out in enough time for people to be ready. So, for those who are waiting for that session, it is on Monday the 3rd, 9 p.m. on Zoom. All right, chapter 17, 18, and the ending of the book, or the epilogue. And so, with that being said, for those who are interested, there's nothing you have to do. You literally just have to click the link that I'll post closer to Monday. It's just a Zoom link. You click. If you don't even want to converse, but you just kind of want to sit and listen, you're free to do that. But yeah, we always have a really dope time on the book club. It's a lot of times we'll cover the book, and then at the end, we just kind of chop it up and stuff. So that's really, really cool. I'm going to jump right into this affirmative action conversation because I think that's what most of you guys are here for. Actually, before I do that, let me read a few comments and then we'll jump into the affirmative action piece. Somebody said, what is the next book? I have not selected it yet, but I will choose about 4 or 5, probably 4 different titles, and then we'll make a poll, and whatever you guys vote on, that's what we'll do. That's how we got the Phyllis Hyman book, and that's how we got the, what is it? Black Respectability in the Space of Whiteness book. That's how we got pretty much the Color of Law. Pretty much every book we've done, I've had you guys vote on. So we'll just keep it going that way. All right. By the way, thank y'all for rocking with me. I don't want to get too annoying doing too many lives too often. So anytime y'all show up, I appreciate it. Look, if I ever do another Zoom party, a good drinking game would be to take a shot every time I say I'm on here. Like everybody would be done in 20 minutes. Let's see. Grape Shot said, my cousins are muscleheads. I wonder if they be doing all that grunting. I have nothing against the folks doing all the grunting in the gym, but sometimes I'm like, some of them sound like they're dying. I just want to make sure folks are okay. Because listen, if they lifting up them 300-400 pound, whatever, I can't help them. You on your own. So if you on that bench press and that thing hits your neck, I don't know what you think I'm gonna be able to do. That ain't in my weight category yet. I have to get 2 other people to help. All right. Yes, congrats on graduating. Did they say where they graduated from? They'll pop up in the chat later down the line. I said it looks like Silent Hill outside. Ryan said I was cutting the grass and almost died. When because I normally go on site twice a week and then I get to work from home the other 3. It used to be once a week on site, 4 days at home. They trying to ease us back in there. I said, y'all ease one more day, I'm gonna find something else to do. But yeah, going from like work, and I don't normally drive because it's faster to just take the subway. But yeah, that walk from my office to the subway to riding the subway and then walking to my house, like, and mind you, I had a mask on outside, but man, I was like freaking lightheaded when I got home. I was like, man, because that all together, the walking probably was like 25 minutes out in all that terrible smoke. Yeah. Somebody said people are hard-headed until they pass out on the street. What up, Alan? Course correction said, my kid was at a beach camp this week and they have to switch to a park tomorrow because the water is unsafe due to the algae bloom. I've seen that too as well in a few cities with the algae bloom. And it's only going to get worse as the weather keeps getting warmer and warmer each year, or the climate keeps changing. It's only going to get worse. Simone T said Seacrest is Annoying, but I know the hosting bag is heavy. Yeah, I know he's paid, but I was like, just mix it up. I don't even have anything against Seacrest, but I just want to see some additional faces. You get tired of seeing the same three people for everything. Stellar Avenger said, "Yeah, I've been known Pat was a hardcore conservative. See, I don't follow a lot of these people. I just watch the little show, see the little joke, and they spin the wheel. So I didn't, that show is not a place where they can really share their politics. So to kind of see that between him and Roseanne, I don't know who is more off the Richter. Roseanne is in another category, which I'm just like, what the heck? Folks spend too much time on the internet digging through stuff, and sometimes I think discernment gets lost in the conversation, and people are easily locked into a lot of shenanigans sometimes, and then they run with it and they feel like they must share it with the world to protect the rest of us. And mind you, it's like, what are y'all talking about? All right. Oh, I remember I had a friend. This is back when everybody thought the world was going to end in 2012. They had been saying this since like '07, and they used to spend all day talking about planet Nibiru, and when Nibiru got here, the reptilians were going to come and eat us all. And I mean, they ran with this, and like they were like, "Yeah, be ready, 2012." I'm like, and I was a little nervous after a while, but yeah, it's like folks gotta like, yeah, keep it light and bright with some of the stuff y'all indulge in. Um, Shia Lewis, hi Calvin. I sent you an email about new music artists. Please take a look. I will definitely go and check when I get a chance. Okay, I need to start with this affirmative action, so we're going to jump into it. All right. All right. So bear with me. We're going to go on a journey because the point that I want to make in all of this is that remember how I've been saying for a really, 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 really long time on this channel that folks are working to cement things. It's kind of an end goal, working to cement and lock in things that they want, specifically when it comes to policy, when it comes to legislation, when it comes to what the rules are going to be. And I've also said this is not the time to tap out politically. This is not the time to disengage because things don't go your way, because pretty much that's what folks want you to do anyway, right? And this is also not the time to try to experiment in regard to your politics. And when I say experiment, I mean experiment in regard to making detrimental decisions because of ego, making detrimental decisions that will be, harmful to your community, your collective, specifically Black folks, because the ego has gotten in the way and you're trying to prove a point, which sometimes may not even be warranted in what you think is warranted in. And when you think you're trying to prove a point, it continues to further along the foolery and the nonsense that's taking place, because now you're almost serving as a distraction. We'll get to that in a second, and I'll be a little bit more expansive on that. But let's go on a journey, shall we? So I want to start with what I was saying. Like I said, they've been cementing everything, and you've seen what's been happening, right? You've seen the attacks on like DEIA as far as like diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility, like those kind of conversations. You're seeing all of the different states that are fighting and clawing to push legislation to outlaw or gut or change some things that have been locked into policy for years and decades in regards to ensuring that people have opportunities. You've seen the challenges against voting rights. You've seen the challenges against things like CRT as far as critical race theory and what's been happening in education, and how, there's all kind of groups that have shown up that claim they're for the people. So weird groups like Moms for Liberty, right? They're up here just causing all kind of havoc. And it's interesting. Pretty much anytime you see a group that has the name Freedom, Patriot, or, Federalist, and any kind of random patriotic term, a lot of times there's some white nationalist group that hates everybody and then hides behind the idea of patriotism and how America used to be in order to kind of push their movement or push their ideologies and, to get somewhat of a following. Right. You've seen even how things like eminent domain, right, have been weaponized against people. I'm going to talk about that in a separate story. That's why I had Joesphine Wright in the title. You've seen this conversation, the whole anti-woke thing. You have Ron DeSantis, whose entire presidential campaign is about ending the woke mob and the woke this and the woke that. Like no policy, just all go after the woke. It makes no sense. It's like you're running for president of an entire country, but you woke. You're gonna have to have something else on the platform. You're not gonna win just doing that. And then you've even seen attacks on things like free lunch in the school systems, right? Free summer lunch programs, all that kind of stuff, kind of being challenged, right? And this is why I say, even when it comes to a conversation like reparations, the same way you're seeing all of these things be challenged or gutted or new movements to end it, understand that if there's ever a conversation or any kind of policy in regard to reparations for Black Americans, understand nothing will be set in stone. The same way they're fighting with the student loan forgiveness and how that's going to be something that's back and forth in the courts and legislation and everything for years to come. Something like reparations will be in the same boat if it's ever approved. They're going to fight and claw because the last thing they want to do is give Black people what's owed to them. They're going to see it as a handout and, well, that ain't fair. And what about this group? Because, whenever it comes to Black folks and anything we get, all of a sudden, that's where the what about conversations come. And all of a sudden, well, what about the people who came here from Tuvalu? All of a sudden, now we care about the people. Well, I care about everybody. But now all of a sudden, it'll be the conversation. They start bringing up, random groups of people just to kind of combat anything that will lead to any kind of progress for Black people collectively. But I want to get to my main point, which was, again, we've talked about the idea of punitive entitlement many, many times before, right? And pretty much my definition of that is when someone is so privileged that they don't get their way. And so because they are so frustrated and they recognize that, through their lens, the world is supposed to stop, drop, and roll for them, and it's supposed to revolve around everything that they want, they have no problem ending and gutting and, challenging or putting into jeopardy the livelihood of other people or how they live or how they matriculate because that person is unhappy, right? So you've seen that many times before, okay? It's kind of like the kid in your class in elementary. If you went to school and I went to school in elementary, we weren't allowed to chew gum in class. So it's kind of like the kid where some kids chews on some gum, another kid finds out they have gum and they're like, give me a piece or I'm going to tell. Same kind of energy, right? So I want to introduce you to this guy, Edward Blum, right? Now, we're about to go on a journey, and I promise this will eventually get to affirmative action, so stay with me. So, Edward Blum, right? He's this individual. He's born in, I forgot when he was born. He's born way back when. I want to say he's born in the 50s, I think. Either way, he decides in 1992 he wants to run for Congress. Now, he's based in Texas. He's going to run as a GOP candidate, and he's going to be running for a district that's represented in the Houston area, right? So he's going to run. He says, there's all these things I want to do and I want to implement, and, there's a district here, and there's a candidate or an incumbent candidate that, is running unopposed, so I'm going to run. So he runs. He loses, right? So he loses, and it's not even close, right? So he's pissed that he lost the election. He said, I ran. I was going to change the lives of these stupid people, and they did not vote for me. So it must be something wrong with the system. It's not the fact that people just weren't interested, but something with the whole system must be wrong. We've seen that behavior before. Carrie Lake in Arizona, who still will not accept that she lost in Arizona. We've also seen that with the former president, who will go to the grave claiming he won 2020, and just say there were millions of illegal votes. And even though he lost the popular vote in both elections, there were millions of illegal votes in 2016, millions of illegal votes in 2020. And I'm just like, you think millions of people want to illegally vote for any of these candidates? I just don't think people realize people are into politics, but they're not locked into the point where they're willing to jeopardize, their livelihood and even their freedom as far as not being incarcerated for a candidate. Unless you're one of those people who decide to become a fan and almost religiously worship a candidate, which is what we've seen kind of with like the MAGA folks. But most people with common sense, are not willing to go and cheat in an election for somebody to win. Because at the end of the day, after 4 years, the next person comes in. Or if it's Congress, after 2 years for the House, the next person comes in. Anyway, getting to my point. So Blum is pissed that he lost. So he decides he's going to sue, right? And so he decides he is going to sue for what you call racial gerrymandering. That's what he claimed. And so this makes it all the way to the Supreme Court in 1996 in a case called Bush v. Vera. And what's interesting is he actually wins this case. Now, his argument was that the district that he was running in had this really, really funky shape, and it purposely was kind of mapped out in a way that just had like this really, really huge, like pretty much Black population was what he was saying, right? And he was saying that, that was something that made it unfair because that specific demographic wasn't going to vote for him anyway. And so he sued and said, yeah, this district was unfair. And, again, racial discrimination or racial gerrymandering, which is very, very funny because when you want to go a little bit deeper, when you talk about how that district was made up, you have to go to the origins of why the district even looked like that. And it leads us to our earlier conversation that we've been having for years of redlining. Right? So you map out where people are allowed to live. They end up in populations and pockets around certain areas, and it becomes districts. And so that's why that district was created that way. And remember that for later, because we're going to talk about this racial gerrymandering that he sued against, right? So again, he wins in the Supreme Court in 96. This gives him some motivation. He's like, you know what? This has inspired me. I'm not going to stop here. I'm just going to go after everything that I don't like in regards to what I think about America. And he would go on to jump into nearly 24 different lawsuits, where the majority of these lawsuits are all centered around things that are centered in race. Usually something that is along the lines of stripping rights away from Black people, more so along the lines of ensuring that white people get any and everything that they want at the expense of other people. That's pretty much what he's been pushing. So he gets inspired. And the other thing is, he often goes and he finds other people to do the dirty work for him. He finds people who can be plaintiffs. So think of like when you see those commercials and it's like, oh, were you affected by, I don't know, taking the Johnson & Johnson baby powder between the years of 1970 and 2015, you may be eligible for blah, 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 blah. So, he's kind of that person. Like, hey, do you feel that you're being discriminated against because of your race? Because, they're putting somebody in a spot that, is undeserving that you should have been in? Call me now. Like, this is kind of the energy he has. So he has all these different groups that he gets behind. He has all these different people that end up being plaintiffs in a lot of his future lawsuits. So let's jump into some of the lawsuits. So one of the major ones would have been from what you would call 2009. This was the Northwest Austin Municipal Utility District 1 versus Holder lawsuit, right? Now, that's Eric Holder, by the way, that we're talking about. So this is where this case jumps into. Now, his argument was that if we go back, and this was something that kind of went against the Voting Rights Act, right? Now, this is not Shelby versus, this isn't Shelby versus Holder. We're not there yet. This is 2009. And so understand that with the Voting Rights Act, the reason why they had to pretty much implement it was because there were about a dozen plus states that had such terrible policy that was detrimental to the voting rights of Black Americans that the government had to say, all right, we're going to have to step in and federally create oversight into what some of these states do with their state elections, because they have so much nonsense going on that there is no way to say that any of this is constitutional. And so that's how we get the Voting Rights Act of 65. And so pretty much, long story short, there's a portion of the Voting Rights Act, which is Section 4A, right? And in that, pretty much what his argument was this. Like, so Section 4A, let me make sure I'm reading it correctly. Section 4A established a formula to identify those areas that violated civil rights in regards to voters. And what they'll do is create a space where there was a 5-year ban on any kind of policy that would be pretty much what you would call offensive, or any kind of policy that would set back an opportunity for people to vote. So things like a literacy test, right? Things like a poll tax, all those kind of things. That's what Section 4A was about. And so his argument was, hey, what I didn't like about this law was, they just did a blanket statement over the entire state of Texas. And so I found this district that, hey, they didn't have any problems with racism. As a matter of fact, these are upstanding people. These are the patriots. These are the true Americans, and they are victims to this system because they don't have an opportunity because they're being judged. And so I feel that districts should be able to opt out of Section 4A of the Voting Rights Act. They should be able to just jump out of it, because they don't need any oversight from the federal government. And then it jumps into those conversations where people are always like, oh, yeah, because the government's all in our business and the tyranny, and they're taking our rights away. So, yeah, we want to fight to continue to take the rights away from somebody else at our own expense without you people trying to tell us what to do, right? And so it goes to court. The court concludes that the district was actually allowed to apply for exemption from Section 4A. However, Section 5 would still stand. Now, Section 5 ensures that any kind of voting changes that are implemented are pre-approved by by the federal government before jurisdictions can make a change. So, like, a perfect example would have been what we saw in Pennsylvania in the 2020 election, where when you got into the conversations about mail-in ballots, this Pennsylvania folks in charge over there decided, well, what we want to do as far as the GOP members in charge, they said, what we want to do is we're going to have election day, and the rule will be all votes must be accounted by the end of election day. If they're not counted, they just won't be utilized. And in addition to that, we will not count mail-in ballots that are going to be coming in months before the election because of early voting and mail-in. We will not count those until the actual election day. So, hey, boom, on election day, you have this influx of votes because you have millions of people who voted. You also have to still count all of the mail-in ballots. We know that mail-in ballots tend to be associated with people that tend to vote Democrat, mainly because in that moment in time, Trump's campaign and everybody on the GOP side said, don't use mail-in votes. It's going to be fraud. Don't use it. So there was a larger there was a larger percentage of people who did mail-in voters that were more so likely to vote for somebody like a Joe Biden. And so their argument was, again, mail-in votes cannot be counted until election day, and all the votes must be counted by election day. If they're not counted, they just won't be utilized. So then think about what ends up happening. There's going to be a priority. Count the same day votes, and then we'll get to the mail-in when we get to it. So that ends up going to the courts. Eventually, the Supreme Court is like, no, you got to count everybody. You can't take, if there's some votes that came in 3 weeks ago and have been sitting there, it's not, the people of America's fault that you guys chose not to count them. You guys thought you were slick and thought you were just going to pretty much just say, oh, we'll get to it, and then let the deadline pass. Kind of like the end of a basketball game when a team is already up by like 4 points. There's 20 seconds on the clock, and the team that's already up just kind of holds the ball and does what they do to run the clock out. So when the game is over, the other side has no opportunity to even try to score. Same kind of nonsense, right? So the court concludes that Section 5 would still need to be upheld, right? And so, where was I going with this? Yeah, so with that being said, what's interesting is then it brings us to Clarence Thomas, who, if anybody had been paying attention, it would have showed you the direction in which he was going to be going later down the line. So let's talk about what Clarence Thomas said in regards to his dissent here, if I can find what I was looking for. All right, so Justice Clarence Thomas in his dissent against this. Now, mind you, he pretty much supported the idea of, the district being able to opt out. But in regards to Section 5, he concurred with the judgment that the district should be able to file a bailout suit. However, he dissented from the majority's decision not to address the constitutionality of Section 5 and argued that Section 5 is no longer constitutional, a position he would take once again in Shelby v. Holder when the issue of Section 5's constitutionality comes into play. Right. So that leads us to Shelby v. Holder. Now, again, that's the one where they go in again. And it's now we just talked about what Section 5 was in regards to federal government saying for these states that have had a history of discriminatory practices, these are the rules that you guys are going to have to follow. Right. These are the laws that you're going to have to abide by to ensure that the residents of your state have a fair shot. That is a section of the Voting Rights Act that has been gutted. All right. OK, so Shelby v. Holder. It gets gutted in, I want to make sure, 2013. And that's why we've seen since 2013, our elections become a lot more chaotic. That's why you've seen people try to, again, this conversation of cementing, try to lock in random policy that makes no sense, but will make sense for people who are fighting for a specific cause, which is why you've seen, state boards try to change how their elections are managed. And you had some states trying to push legislation where if they're not satisfied with the outcome of the election, they can claim that they're going to go and redo the election, or there's going to be different boards that will kind of make the final decision on who won. Like all of that kind of stuff has been in litigation. Now, the Supreme Court did shut down one of those recently, but long story short, since 2013, we've seen a nonsense in regards to what's been happening with voter rights, in regards to purging a lot of voter rolls. The rules have just changed. Pretty much every state can do whatever they want. And as far as Section 5 no longer being implemented, there's no regulation in regard to making sure that states can't screw over people. And the only way that anything can be combated is if it makes it up to the Supreme Court through, the different court circuits. And so rather than there being a blanket of protection on voter rights, it's a free-for-all. And if people are mad enough, and if they have enough money to figure out the litigation and pay for the lawyers, then God willing, they get lucky and they might be able to go to the Supreme Court, which may not even vote in their favor. That's voting rights right now. So anyway, with that being said, we have Section 5 get gutted in 2013. Thank you, Clarence Thomas and Roberts and some of the other ones who jumped into that. And it's very interesting because, of course, they pretty much said, I'm sorry, not Section 5, Section 4. I can get them mixed up. They're all of them. It's the same nonsense. Section 4 is the same piece. Section 4 is a portion in regards to putting that suspension on different policy that is, like I said, something that would be disenfranchising. So again, the poll tax, the literacy test, things like that, having random hours where, the polls are only going to be open from 1 p.m. till 1:15 p.m. And if you ain't there, too bad. And if you're in line, too bad, like that kind of stuff. So Section 4 gets gutted. Anyway, so after that, he was like, I'm not done. I have more I would like to do. Then that's when we get the Fisher versus University of Texas. Now, we've talked about that before. That's Abby Fisher. That's the girl who did not get into University of Texas through some program that she felt would give her guaranteed admission. She didn't get in. She felt it must be because the black folks are in her seat. It must be because everybody else who's not white is in her seat. People who are undeserving. She sued, lost. Now, mind you, Edward Blum is behind all these people. He's pushing all these people into these spaces. Then we get Evenwell versus Abbott, right? Now, with the Evenwell versus Abbott case, now it initially stems from the Gray versus Sanders case of 1963. This was the one person, one vote legislation, right? It required legislative districts must have equal populations in regards to how they're mapped out. Okay, it states that states should draw their districts by equalizing the total population rather than the voting population. All right, so properly apportioned districts contain nearly the equal number of people based on the total population. Let me just say that I'm slowing down. I'm talking a little fast. So again, proper apportioned districts contain nearly an equal amount of people based on the total population. So this is what this case was about. So Edward Blum felt, long story short, with every district, they mapped them out. They're supposed to be kind of correlating to the population, and it's based on the population of the people in the district. His argument was, we should make it based on the population of people that are voters and eligible voters, because he says it makes no sense to just draw a district based on the people who live there, because then that makes people who are eligible voters, or counties that have lots of eligible voters, it makes them a minority to other counties that have people who can't vote. And some people may say, oh, that sounds fair, but then you'd have to look at the logistics, okay? When you're talking about a district, especially in a place like Texas, if we're talking about people who have lost their right to vote, now we have to have a conversation about the prison and industrial complex and the flaws within the judicial system. We also have to have a conversation about the fact that in a lot of these districts, people have children. Children cannot vote. However, they are still collateral to the decisions that are going to be made. In addition to that, that also includes people who are undocumented. And the reason why all of this would still be important is because when it comes to what's going to happen in regards to how a budget is laid out and what districts are going to get what is going to go to the schools, what is going to go to the hospitals, what's going to go to the roads, if you only base that specifically on people who are eligible voters and not the actual populations of that district, then it's going to lead to a lot of discrepancies where a lot of very heavily populated areas that may not have large populations of eligible voters are going to lose a lot of access to resources at the expense, or more so to the hands of people who wealthier districts. Think about a lot of districts where there are older people who don't have children, who are in a different capacity. They're going to have a different voting pattern. They're going to have a different need. They're going to have a different want. And so when you're talking about the voting patterns or what it is that people would stand behind, it's going to vary. So his argument, like I said, was, yeah, let's just make it where it's not a one person, one vote. It's going to be based on people who are eligible to vote. And we've seen, again, talking about Section 4 of the Voting Rights Act, talking about Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act, we've seen how governors will purge voters off the voter rolls. Brian Kemp, 2018, getting rid of 218,000 voters out of all the counties surrounding Gwinnett County, DeKalb County, Cobb County, Henry County, all the counties where you're going to have a whole bunch of black folks. Let's purge all of them up out of there. So that's kind of like what you see happening, right? And so anyway, with that being said, he ends up losing that case. So that one is a loss. This doesn't go too well. And he doesn't stop, because he's like, listen, I'm going to get what I want. So he continues, and he has all these different groups. He's also the president of a group called the Alliance for Fair-Based Recruitment, or Fair Board Recruitment. And pretty much that is an agency that is fighting to ensure that when companies have boards, that programs like diversity, inclusion, and stuff like that are not included when it comes to mapping out the board of a lot of these companies. So right now, that group is currently suing against diversity requirements for the boards of some of the publicly traded companies in the country right now. They've also sued California in regards to the conversation of race and gender quotas. Now, mind you, race quotas have been outlawed since 1978, and there's been legislation and litigation going against that for years and years and years, which is why, in regards to a lot of conversations around affirmative action and race, the language is always written in a way where it's not about a quote, it's more so about equity and ensuring that there's opportunity for people who may not have the same accessibility. That's where the language is shifted into, right? And it doesn't stop there, because then this leads us into our modern day. So then we have what you call another group that he starts, right? Students for Fair Admissions, right? The SFF or SFFF, whatever they're called. Anyway, so this is pretty much what jumps into where we're at now. Now, they sued the president and fellows of Harvard College in 2019. Now, it was dismissed, thrown out. However, in this country, when you lose a case, you just keep going up the court system until you get to the Supreme Court. And so this is the case that finds its way to the Supreme Court. Now, mind you, there's additional pieces that are added to it. So eventually you start adding UNC into this conversation and a few other universities. Now, understand, there's a huge thing that shifts by the time we get to the Supreme Court, right? This is not the same Supreme Court of 2016, 2017. You now have Gorsuch, you have Brett Kavanaugh, you have Amy on there. And so this brings us to today, where, pretty much Supreme Court is like, hey, it's racist and it is unconstitutional to use race in regards to admissions for, college acceptance letters. And this is started from pretty much with this specific group. Edward Blum pretty much found some Asian students. And mind you, this group allegedly has 20,000 people in it. I haven't seen the full registry of who's in there, so I don't know if it's a full 20,000 or what. But he pretty much convinced a group of Asian students that yeah, you guys are being discriminated against because they're putting people who are unqualified in your seats. Those black folks are coming in there taking all your spots, all these different folks, and so people ran with that, and this has made it all the way to the Supreme Court. I'm gonna pause because I have a whole lot more to say, but I just want to that's the groundwork we're starting with. That's our foundation for tonight. So understanding that when I say people work to submit things, when I say that, things are an ongoing fight, because when it comes to race in this country, nothing is precedent. Especially like when it comes to race, nothing is precedent, especially when it comes to dealing with black folks. When it comes to any kind of rights we have, nothing is ever set in stone. So even though you think there may be a great victory we have, we're always going to have to fight and claw to maintain and protect it. So going back to my point, this is a man who decided to run for office 31 years ago, lost, felt some kind of way, and decided because a certain group of people voted against him, he was going to make sure they never had another opportunity in the world. And so he goes into, like we said, over 24 different cases. Any kind of space where there's an opportunity for black people to have anything, he's suing against it and trying to claim that he's being discriminated against or giving access to black people with anything. And it's not even a conversation of giving access. It's making a population whole, more so giving a remedy to the flaws that have existed in the past. Any of that automatically is offensive. Any of that automatically goes against the protection of a white status quo in which he abides by. And that's why we've seen him go case after case after case, whether it be voting rights, whether it goes to who's on the board at these corporations. Understand, when you have a specific board at the corporation, they're going to dictate and delegate to the president and the CEO of how that company should be run, what their image should be like, what kind of people should they bring on. So when you can have a board that is against all of that, then the company isn't really locked into any space where they have to do anything in regard to abiding by a set of standards or a code of conduct in regard to their hiring practices or how they maneuver or how they do anything. So going against that, going against even in regards to conversations around college admissions, and understanding that, at least for now, even though we're seeing the pendulum start to shift in regards to the value of a college education in the United States, it still symbolizes and equates to an opportunity to get through a door that somebody who does not have a degree doesn't always have the same access to. But again, recognizing that he can go and challenge that and paint a picture of, the idea that, yeah, these folks are just undeserving. And it's because, they're attacking, they are going after the Asian population. And so I'm going to pause because I have a whole lot more to say, but I want to read some comments first. And I need a sip of this tea because my throat is dry. All right. So, but now, yeah, we're about to really go in live or go in real deep in a second, but let me just read a few comments. I just need to pause and catch a breather. Okay. Let me see. Let me get to the affirmative action comments here. The Real Aries kid said, can we toss them another word? We're done with woke is making them cuckoo for cuckoo. Don't get me started with them. The term woke is starting to get on my nerves. All right. Somebody said, whoa, I was eavesdropping on the Daughters of the American Revolution saying something about the woke movement at lunch Wednesday. Like, we'll come back to the woke conversation. Just know, white America, y'all be on some nonsense. Like, it's interesting how there's different pockets of things to be outraged about, but they get mad at things that really don't. I'll come back to it. I just, it's so funny. Every time I look at DeSantis and I watch him make every speech, it's just woke this and woke that. And woke. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, shut up. Like, stop. All right. Exactly. Somebody said entitlement is a dangerous mental state. It certainly is. Talk about it. Okay, you know what? I'm still in my pocket. Let me just get to this portion I want to get to, and I'll come back to the comments because I don't want to lose half y'all on this. Okay, so before I go any further, I just want to read some of the commentary that came from some of the justices. First, I want to read Ketanji Brown, and then I'm going to read what Robert said out here. So if I can get my notes here. Why are my notes backwards? This is not how I wrote this. Okay, so not COVID, wrong pipe. So Associate Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson had some thoughts on this rationalization. Joined in the dissent by Justices Eleanor Kagan and Sonia Sotomayor, she writes, the court has come to rest on the bottom line conclusion that racial diversity in higher education is only worth potentially preserving insofar as it might be needed to prepare Black Americans and other underrepresented minorities for success in the bunker, not the boardroom, a particularly awkward place to land in light of the the majority opts to ignore. We have now entered an era in which race is only legally permissible. We have now entered an area in which race is only a legally permissible college admissions factor within the context of military recruitment. Black people can be considered when schools are preparing them for war, just not to study, say, chemistry. And now that is coming from the fact that, again, they're going to make an exception with this in regards to military academies. The United States contends that race-based administration programs further compelling interest at our nation's military academies. No military academy is a party to these cases. However, none of the courts below address the propriety of race-based admission systems in that context. The opinion also does not address the issue in light of the potentially distinct interests that military academics may present. So when it comes to this ruling and what 2 cents has been said, military academies are not a part of this conversation. So yes, we can continue to still go and get shot up for the country. But when it comes to access to certain academic institutions, well, no, that race is out of the absolutely not. No. All right. Anyway, then we get to Justice Roberts. Right? Where's this fool at? Where is he at? Roberts, where did you go? Is this you? Yeah, this is him right here. All right. For the reasons provided above, this is Justice Roberts. The Harvard and UNC admissions program cannot be reconciled with the guarantees of equal protection clause. Both programs lack sufficiently focused and measurable objectives warranting the use of race, unavoidably employ race in a negative manner involving racial stereotyping and lack of meaningful endpoints. We have never permitted admissions programs to work in that way, and we will not do so today. All right. So with that being said, so Roberts felt that this was illegal discrimination, right? He also has said before, the federal medicine has become worse than the disease. All right. These are some intense words here, right? And so the point that I want to get at is what you're seeing is, and we could honestly make this entire live specifically on affirmative action. I still wouldn't have enough time to cover everything I want to say. You have a lot of people who really do not understand race systemically. Some do, but they just choose to ignore it because they recognize that giving a remedy to it would mean that there's a possibility that their livelihood would be compromised. Because again, when your entire lineage or your entire wealth has been compounded upon the setbacks of other different groups of people that have been disenfranchised through policy that you've implemented, then you recognize that a shift to that policy, a shift to that status quo means that your livelihood may just possibly change. So some people are going to fight to protect that status quo. Right. And so the point that I want to get at is because this will eventually find its way back in the course at some point. This is not the end of this conversation. It will come back at some point. I think in order to successfully have any more conversations on anything in regard to affirmative action, it has to come from a conversation of destructive policy. And what I mean by that is this. The same way that Black farmers in 1999 lost their lawsuit against the federal government when they said that, okay, we're suing in regards to how much we missed out on because there was racism. The courts pretty much said you can't really prove it, and so at this point in time, the only way to move specifically as Black people, as a collective, with any kind of policy or anything that we want, you're going to have to show the actual damage claim. You're going to have to show the claim of hurt. You're going to have to show the end result of policy. And so I think in regard to something like affirmative action, the challenge has to be a conversation of destructive policy, punitive policy, destructive policy that has affected Black people collectively. Because if you're going to make that conversation, if they're trying to say, because the argument they're making right now, as far as people who are against affirmative action, they're saying it's not fair to, discriminate against white and Asian people because of race, because they have convinced themselves that they're the smartest people in the room and the rest of us are just all stupid. And if we end up in one of these spaces, we weren't supposed to be there. However, I think in regards to a conversation of race in regards to college admissions, the question should be more so, are you a part of a collective that has been negatively affected or impacted by destructive policy implemented by the federal government of the United States or state and local politics? Now you can bring in the conversation of redlining. You can bring in the conversation of the wealth gap. You can bring in the conversation of discriminatory practices in the job, in as far as the job or the workforce, in healthcare, the conversations in regards to even when it comes to food, when it comes to what's happening in education. When you can tie everything to the origins and show that it's backed by policy, now you have an argument. And the perfect argument, and it's always going to be redlining for me, at least at this point, because at this point, when it comes to property, That is the wealth for a lot of folks, but you can go even deeper. You can talk about different groups of people who were left out of the policy. All right. We know the Homestead Act. Black folks got none of that land. All right. But that was something that a lot of white Americans got in. And remember, the Homestead Act, this is after but they start pushing the Native Americans out. And now there's all this land that's up for grabs and everything like that. White people start claiming their 1/5 Cherokee and all this other stuff. They start getting all this land on top of the blood quantum laws that are also out there where, yeah, I'm going to pay you, here's $15. You tell them I'm part of I'm one of the Sioux. I'm one of the Sioux. Yeah, I got a cousin that's a Sioux Native American, so I'm one of them. So give me my check. So again, black people left out of all of that. Black people left out of the New Deal. Black people left out of the GI Bill. Black people left out of the FHA program. Black people, even the Social Security Act of 1935 initially left out. You know, when you talk about what happened with USDA farms being left out of the USDA program. So with all of those different policies that have been backed by a federal government, it would show and highlight the fact that, yes, there is wealth that has been compounded by white Americans, mainly because they had access to something that Black Americans did not have access to. And Black Americans did not have access to that mainly because of policy. Not because, well, it's still because of race, but it was because of race and it was backed by policy. So now when you're going to a court, you're not just arguing saying, oh, it's because we were Black and they did this to us. You are going to have pretty much at this point in time, the way that our courts are operating and the way that America's moving, you are going to have to show the policy and the end result and the hurt and the claim of what needs to be done in order to repair. Because at this point, conversations around race for white people and the people who've decided to jump on this is centered on feelings and what they think race is. And the greatest thing about policy is that you can never hide it. It's all in our archives. It's documented. You can't argue opinion versus policy. You can't argue feelings versus policy because the policy will always stand. The policy is going to show you the end result. It's going to show you the wealth that was built or the wealth that was lost, as opposed to feelings, because feelings are always going to change. This is why I said when it comes to the laws, when it comes to Black folks, precedent is never set in stone. They're always going to be coming for us. And so the point that I'm making is if you can highlight and showcase that it is the policy that has had a negative effect and the numbers and the research is there. And it's not even just in one realm. We could just talk housing and the wealth that was there. We could talk about the fact that before Black people were allowed to be a part of the FHA program, houses depreciated over time. They didn't appreciate. They started appreciating once we came into the programs. Okay, let's start appreciating, making things a bit higher and more inaccessible, right? Okay, and then same thing with the redlining as well. As redlining starts to shift, you start to see houses finally start to appreciate. Once Black people were allowed to be in different spaces, okay, well, the houses need to appreciate so we can make our neighborhoods more desirable. Our neighborhoods can be more, in a space where it's not as accessible. So yeah, all of a sudden, some random house that was built in 1922 got all kind of problems, but because of the location and everything else, you can pay, it's worth $700,000 and it's only 800 square feet. Okay, that's where we're at. So again, conversation in housing, conversation in healthcare. When you're talking about, again, for that question that I said that they should probably start posing. Are you a part of a population that has been negatively affected by a policy that was somewhat disenfranchising to your collective population? You could talk about sterilization. And mind you, that was still going on in the 1980s. If we want to talk about North Carolina, you have all of these teenage girls and young women who've gotten pregnant. And when they go and either have these babies or whatever else happens, doctors literally sterilize them to make sure that they couldn't have any more children, right? That's only 40 years ago. Okay? Understand that policy has played a huge role in all of the flaws in the United States. When you want to talk about racism, the feelings are one piece, but it's the policy that implements and affects everybody. You can feel however you want to feel about me. I promise you, I don't care. However, when those feelings come into a space where you have power and now you want to do something to ensure that your feelings come into fruition and it comes at my expense, now we have a problem, right? And so pretty much the point that I want to make too is some of the arguments that people are trying to make is they're trying to say that, the problems of the past don't exist anymore. Folks just need to work hard. I've seen the word merit a million times today. White folks on Twitter were showing the merit. They just don't have the merit. The merit. Man, I'm like, oh my God. Because everybody in here is Albert Einstein. Now all of y'all are Albert Einstein and the rest of us just crazy. Okay. But anyway, with that being said, they've made this conversation about, everything's equal now, and then, they'll latch on to the symbolic gestures. Yeah, y'all had a Black president. Beyonce's on some major stadium tour. Oprah's a billionaire. What else do they hop on? Serena Williams won like 22, champion cups, whatever you call them. All the big giant things that are symbolic, right? And then they'll like to kind of twist and shift information to kind of make it seem like everything is all good and dandy. And so now they're saying, well, now we have to make everything equal. It's an equal playing field. And so their argument is, in education, it's an equal playing field. And at this point, we just have to give everybody a fair chance. Let me tell you why that doesn't always quite work. So y'all know I love to do a scenario, right? So this is going to be our scenario, right? Let's say there's two houses and there's a tornado that comes and hits the area, right? So house A, right? They get lucky. They get kind of spare. They just had two broken windows and maybe one of the little shingles blew off the roof, right? So that's house A. Hit by a tornado, just two windows broken and one shingle came off the roof. Then we have house B, right? Completely destroyed. It was a direct hit. That tornado came, clean house, tore up everything, even lifted the foundation out of the ground. There is nothing left, okay? Like Sarabi off Lion King. There's nothing left, all right? So government comes in and says, all right, we see it's all kind of craziness that's happened over here. We're going to give house A and house B $10,000 because that's equal and that's fair, right? Equal and fair. You're both getting the same thing, right? Now, if we want to tie that into a symbolism conversation, recognize that after we just had this conversation about all the policy that's come in, recognize that the U.S. has pretty much destroyed Black America through policy and systems. Now, Black Americans are resilient. We've always found a way to get around the nonsense. But when you're talking about things on paper, the U.S. has worked to destroy the Black collective since we've been here, right? But anyway, get into my point. So A gets their $10,000 for the two broken windows in the shingle. I don't even think they spent $1,000 to fix the two windows in the shingle. They actually found the shingle in the street. They just went and hammered it back on up there and they were good to go. So they get to keep the rest of their money. They're just chilling. They're going to build a pool in the backyard. They might put a sprinkler system up in there. They might even redo the carpets and get some new, stainless steel appliances. All right. Now, house B, we said it was destroyed. Now, I don't know what kind of house you're going to build with $10,000, right? But house B is totally gone. But with this $10,000, they're going to have to figure out how to build this house. But then it gets even more interesting. Now, this is where I'm going to let this be the symbolic conversation of where the Asian population comes into this conversation, right? As far as those who fought and sued to end affirmative action because they felt that we took their seats, all right? So then you have house C, which is a neighbor in a nearby area. They're not under the same jurisdiction. So the government gave that jurisdiction a different amount of money, right? So that nearby neighbor was under a different jurisdiction. They didn't even really have any damage. And so the government gave them $5,000 because, again, they're in a different district from house A and B. So they get $5,000, right? So rather than saying, hey, all right, well, we actually got it pretty good over here. And okay, cool. They said, wait a minute. Well, we heard people at house B got $10,000, right? And so rather than paying attention to the fact that both A and B got $10,000, but B got $10,000 and it's not nearly enough to make them whole from what they've just been through. A got $10,000, didn't even need it, to be honest. They just had two busted windows and a shingle go out there. Rather than being mad at the fact that A pretty much is pretty much pulling a whole bunch of extra nonsense out of the system because A doesn't need as much as they've gotten, and really that could have gone to somebody else, they're going to be mad at B because they're mad that B got more than them, according to how they see things, because they're looking at the end result, not, the origins of what is, right? And so rather than being mad, they're pissed at B. And so what ends up happening is they go to the people in charge and say, hey, there's some discrepancies within this jurisdiction because we only got $5,000. Now, we got hit by the tornado too. I mean, it didn't tear up nothing, but, we were scared. We were really scared. It was loud. It was scary. We had to go and sit in the tub for a little bit, but we were scared. And so we only got $5,000, but we heard people at the house B, they got $10,000. And that's just unfair because everything should be equal. We should be about equality, right? And so what ends up happening is government is like, okay, well, if y'all are going to sit here and start whining, I guess we'll have to make things fair. So now A's already spent all their money, so there's nothing for them to give up. So they go to B and say, well, listen, we gave y'all $10,000, but the people at house C are saying it's not fair because they only got $5,000. So you got to give a little bit of yours to them too. You got to give some of what you have to them because it isn't fair if they only got $5,000 and you guys got 10. That wouldn't be fair, So yeah, y'all got to give up to something, right? And so long story short, what ends up happening, if we tie that into our symbolic gesture, right? That's symbolic of what's just happened with education in America, right? When you're talking about the fact that the reason that it even had to be an affirmative action in regards to admissions is because when you talk about our education system and what has happened to Black Americans in this country, we are still not made whole, right? everything you could think of. Remember when we talked about Prince Edward County, Virginia, that one time, where this is after Brown versus Board of Education, and the schools are supposed to integrate, and the white folks in that area were like, we are not sharing those schools with them Negroes. Absolutely not. We'll just close all the schools. And so they closed all the schools for like 2-3 years. I think this was like 1954 to 56, or it might be 56 to 58. I can't remember the 2-year period, but they closed all the schools for 2 years just because they refuse to share any spaces. And also understand, because I've been seeing this conversation a lot on social media, and people keep saying that, when you're talking about the fight for integration, people keep looking at it as the idea of wanting to be in white spaces. I think people need to understand the conversation around integration was more so around the fact that funding was not equitable, and that, long story short, no, we don't want to be in the white spaces. We're not fighting to sit in a classroom with a bunch of white kids to be spit on, but we're fighting for the fact that this white school is getting all the funding. We're paying the same taxes as them, sometimes an even higher tax. If you remember what we read in The Color of Law, where it talked about at one point, Black homeowners were being taxed at a higher rate in a lot of cities than white homeowners in the same area. So understand, a lot of times Black folks are paying even more in taxes than their white counterparts, but they weren't seeing any of the funding. They weren't seeing any of the benefits, any of the residuals. And so they're getting these lackluster, less than facilities. We can have the conversations around the pools and how, the pools were segregated. And when they had to integrate the pools, folks decided, let's just fill them up with cement. We are not sharing with you Negroes. So long story short, it goes and it goes and it goes. But the point that I'm getting at is Black people have never been made whole in regards to education. Even when you talk about a conversation of equity and funding, because of our tax codes, because education tends to be funded through property taxes, when you bring in that conversation of redlining, that conversation of appreciation, that conversation of compound wealth built into specific areas, right? There's pockets of wealth in white America that Black people have never had access to. And it's not because they did not work hard to get to it. It was stolen from them. It was snatched away. And they were criminalized for even wanting to try to get it back. And because of that, you have these pockets in the white American population that became extremely wealthy. And then they start changing the laws and the code. So once you start seeing what happens after Brown versus Board of Education, now we start to see a shift in how we're going to fund the schools, right? And so now it's going to really be more emphasis on property taxes. So if you're in an area that is not financially well off, it's not as affluent because there's no investment. Because again, even when you talk about the conversation of white flight, right? Black folks start moving in after redlining is outlawed. You start having the mandatory busing and everything like that. Black folks are getting up out of there, okay? Perfect example would be a place like Laurelton, Queens, right? That used to be an all-white area, and then Black folks move up in there, or a few Black folks start moving in. White folks get the hell up out of there. We got to go. And mind you, that's like beachfront property, right on the water, Atlantic Ocean. People got yards. If you live in New York, you most likely ain't got a yard unless you in Queens somewhere, right? Or some parts of like the real northern part of Brooklyn and some parts of the Bronx possibly. But folks were like, we're getting up out of here. These folks are moving in, getting out of here, right? And so again, you watch neighborhoods. Fortunately, Laurelton is pretty well off, but you've seen a lot of other areas where there's divestment, right? They stop investing in the schools. They stop investing in grocery stores. They stop investing in hospitals. They stop investing in all of the resources that people need, the libraries, everything else like that. The fire departments are few and in between and everything else like that. You know what I mean? Or even if you look at like what happened with the Bronx, right? And all of the landlords doing the insurance fraud and setting the high rises on fire, you know what I mean, to get the insurance claim. And to the point where some of these buildings were burning and the fire departments were just like, we ain't even going over there no more. Y'all got it. Y'all tear your stuff up too bad, right? And so all of that plays a role into, everything, because what ends up happening when all of the resources are taken out of neighborhoods, when they're taken out of areas where there's no investment, okay, there's no money to go around, people stop moving there, there's no commerce being, positively affected, that automatically starts to strip away from the schools, of course. This could lead us into another conversation about charter schools and magnet schools and all that. I'm not doing that one tonight. But long story short, just understand that a lot of Black Americans in this country have never had a fair shot in regards to education because they've never had the same kind of access to resources. It's always been that way. And Black people have always had to perform 2, 3, and 4 times better than the next person just to be considered half as good. And that's why I found it so interesting that so many people would hop on this idea and paint it as if Black folks have just undeservedly jumped into all of these spaces and taken everybody's spot. And it's so crazy because it's like, y'all jumped into this foolery. And especially for those in the Asian community that decided to jump into this conversation, like y'all decided to jump into this foolery, right? You decided that Black people were the problem and claimed you were discriminated against while fighting to ensure that a system that aimed to end discrimination against everybody would be destroyed. because you feel like you'll have a better shot. Like you came in and fought to destroy progress because you felt like you didn't get what you're supposed to get. You know what I mean? So what I want to do, since let's talk numbers for a minute, because I think what's also happening is people like to paint this picture as if you go to Harvard and it looks like, 48th and Crenshaw, which there would be nothing wrong with that, but they like to paint that picture. So let's talk Ivy Leagues real quick. All right. So if we're talking Ivy Leagues and we're talking Black students, now mind you, I went to an HBCU. I chose one. Happy I went to one. Greatest experience ever. But like I said in my HBCU versus PWI debate, Black voices are needed in both spaces, because when you start having an all-white establishment, or an establishment where the lens of the campus is seen through a lens of whiteness, or the heart of a campus is seen through the lens of whiteness, that means that the people that are on the campus will never be able to matriculate through the real world. This is why when people always be like, oh, HBCUs are not the real world, everything is a little blip. Okay, first of all, HBCUs tend to be more diverse than majority institutions if we want to go there. But second, recognizing that the thing about HBCUs in regards to the heart of the campus is it comes from a lens of what it's like to be on the other side, right? What it's like to be on the receiving end of the nonsense. And so it creates a space where you have students that are able to adapt and fall into any space, in any environment, and not jump into it from a space of privilege or a space of feeling that they're the authoritative figure in any kind of space. That's why I feel like we're needed at both. But anyway, let me get to my numbers. When we talk about the Black population at Harvard, 6.6%. All right. Well, what is the Black population? I'm sorry, what's the Asian population at Harvard? 29.9%. Okay, let's talk about the Black population at Yale, 6.5%. Asian population at Yale, 21.3%. Let's talk about the Black population at Brown College, 7%. Brown College, as far as Asian population, 15.8%. Let's talk about Princeton. The Black population is 4.7%. The Asian population, 18.6%. Okay, Columbia, 5.1%. Asian population, 13%. Cornell, 5%. All right, the Asian population at Cornell, 20.83%. But y'all wanted to sit here and paint us to be the problem. Like that's you. If we were to look at this through a lens of just the demographics of the United States and the populations, Asians are overrepresented at most of these institutions. And this is not to take away from whatever they're working towards, whatever they're aiming at. But the problem is, this is more so me responding to the idea of people trying to say that we have just, infused and had an influx into these spaces that we weren't supposed to be in. Like, that's the nonsense that I'm responding to, because like, what are y'all doing, right? And then it gets even deeper, because really, if you wanted to have some beef, the beef should have been against legacy students, okay? Because legacy is another conversation. Let's talk legacy for a second, shall we? Let me pull up some numbers here. Y'all know I love me some numbers. Let me see here. What do I want to pull up? Because I was just like, y'all really, really tried it. All right, let's go back to Harvard again. All right, 34% of Harvard students are white. 43% of those students are either legacies or children of faculty, kin of donors, or a recruited athlete. 75% of them would have not gotten in had it not been for that special status. Now, that's coming from the National Bureau of Economic Research, okay? So again, you have legacy students there that are there, right? Meaning, okay, uncle went there, so now you pretty much get a shot to come in here. And then you go on, and it's like a chain reaction, right? You have the people that are rich and just, I'm going to build a library in my name, and now, all of my offspring can go there, so on and so forth. Athletes are another conversation. But you just see all these different groups that are in there. But again, you choose to go after the people that barely got an edge in the door, right? And it's funny because honestly, Black folks aren't even pressed to go to places like Ivy Leagues, to be honest, like that anyway, a lot of times. And so it's just very interesting that, again, we have to pretty much be the scapegoat for all the flaws. Like, it seems like anytime people feel that they haven't gotten what they want, somehow we're responsible for it. And we just be minding our business. We be minding our business, trying to do our little jobs, do whatever we got to do. And, it's just hot mess. I have a little bit more to say, but I'm going to pause for a second. And it goes back to what I said, I think 2 or 3 lives ago. Understand that when you have a system that has been screwed over and it benefited one group overabundantly, and there's another group that pretty much got an overabundance as well. Because again, when we're talking about affirmative action, the biggest, beneficiaries of affirmative action have been white women and the Asian population, especially in academics, right? It's the point that should be made, because people look at it as, again, people who are not qualified getting into spaces, as opposed to looking at it from a space where institutions have had such a problem with specifically only choosing a certain kind of candidate, usually white, right? And paying them to be the standard, where institutions come into a flaw where they only operate by what they deem as the standard, and that standard becomes the norm. And that standard is overrepresented. And what ends up happening is the productivity is not where it should be, because you don't have the best of the best of the best, because you haven't gone into all of the pools. You only went into one that you felt should have been there, and maybe you got a sprinkle of another. And so what ends up happening is you don't have the best of the best of the best, because every group is not fairly represented. Every group is not having opportunity to showcase what they're able to do. But you let go for generations and generations and generations one specific demographic that gets to be mediocre at this point, because now they know they got a ticket in the door with everything they want anyway. They don't have to fight and do anything. And so, a lot of Black folks who are in academia can tell you their experience, especially those who did not go to HBCUs. They honestly, F that. Even at HBCUs, once you start getting to those higher levels, you get to those graduate levels, you see the Blackness start to disappear. Some of these graduate programs at HBCUs are almost majority white and Asian. You don't even see no Black folks in there. I've seen a whole bunch of boards and all kind of stuff where it's this university, something, something, and almost everybody there is white. And so it's interesting, because even with that, remember we talked about the student who decided to sue Howard for discrimination. Mind you, he was in there just causing all kind of havoc, but he made the claim that it's because he was white. Like, understand that a lot of times what has happened is people like to twist words. People like to twist meanings of equality and racism. And so a lot of times they will go and stir the pot, do all kind of terrible things. Then when they get called out, or then when people kick back, now all of a sudden they want to be victims. And now, again, it goes back to punitive entitlement. Now everybody must suffer. We must sue. Same with Rachel Dolezal, the lady who now wants to pretend that she's Black. She changed her name to something else now. It's not even Rachel Dolezal now. She done went to the motherland and then put some names together, and now that's her name. But she's somebody who went to Howard, right? Went there, sued once she was not going to be able to get some kind of tenure track position, and decided it was because of racial discrimination. So a white woman goes to Howard. She got into Howard, gets the red carpet rollout, scholarships, everything, doesn't get a specific position, feels that she's been discriminated against, and then decides to sue. Then, I guess, I don't know what happens. She decides she's Black now, and then goes and gets into all these prominent positions at the NAACP in Spokane, Washington, and, goes on all kind of tours and gets all kind of deals and everything else like that. Like, see how people like to manipulate and utilize race to their own favor. And again, it's always at the expense of who? Black folks. Let's pause and read some of these comments, because I've been talking for a good minute. And to anybody who got a problem with what I said what I said. All right. I probably won't be able to get to every comment, but we will do the best we can. All right. And again, this is not about, because I want people to really, really understand, this is not about the idea of just, throwing people into a space, because the other piece is too, in addition to just even getting into the schools, you still have to be able to finish the schools. And so what's happening is you have a lot of very overqualified Black students, and additional other students from other populations, but tonight I'm talking about me and mine. Lots of overqualified Black students that are not considered for these programs for various reasons, that are left out, right? And we've even seen the numbers. You saw what happened with a place like UCLA, or UCLA, when they took admissions race out of admissions. You saw what happened with their Black population, right? Pretty much their Black population are athletes, and that's it. Right? It's a hot mess. And I guess my frustration with those who decided to hop on this case, especially from the Asian community, it's like, again, people like to do this Black and brown coalition. Like I said before, we have no allies in this. It's everybody for themselves, especially for Black folks. We're on our own. People will be your ally until they think you getting something that they want, right? And I say the same thing even when you talk white America. Like I've always said, white America never moves as a collective until it's time to be racist. Like white Americans are not united. That's why when everybody's always like, oh, this is divisive, we need to come together, blah, blah. Even when you talk Black and white, that's one conversation, but white people don't even come together on anything until it's time for the racism to kick in. When it's time to do some racist stuff, then they get in line real quick, all right? They show you every time they go to the polls. But understand, like, everybody's pretty much on their own. So when they kind of paint the whole Black and brown coalition, people will use that Black and brown coalition for their advantage. But then when it's time for, again, the conversation of anti-Blackness, or if they feel that Black people are going to get a leg up, then that's when all the racism jumps out and people decide to go and be white adjacent. Now all of a sudden they got a problem with everything. So you done benefited from these very programs that you now want to cut. Make it make sense. All right. I know the comments are going to be wild on this video after it uploads. Somebody said, support your HBCUs again. You won't have these problems. And see, even with that, now this is going to be another challenge. You're going to have admissions skyrocket at HBCUs. And they're not going to be in a capacity to accommodate all of these students. Like this, in the same way that so many of y'all broke y'all necks to tear down Howard because of the housing situation. It's like, did anybody, and I talked about it before, but then it's like you also have to look at the logistics of what was happening at the spot. And it wasn't just Howard, because the same issue was happening in Georgetown and other places, but Howard got the brunt of the smoke. But again, that specific year, that was Howard's largest freshman class. I think they took almost 4,000 freshmen in, right? Nearly double what they normally would take in. So two issues arose. They ran out of housing, which is something that that happens at every major university anyway. And HBCUs and Howard specifically have always had that problem. When I went to Howard, freshmen and sophomores were the priority for housing. After that, you, God willing, figure it out. You had to get, I forgot they were called Bison points or something. It was kind of like a lottery. And basically, depending on what kind of student you were, what your grades were like, what you participated in, blah, 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 blah. And also how far your hometown or permanent address was from the campus would determine how many points you would get in regard to applying for housing, right? So they had a shortage on housing. And then because it was the pandemic, remember, the university closed for an entire academic year. So you had about 36 units out of, I want to say about 5,500 or 6,000, I can't remember the full figure, that had some mold problems. 36 units had mold problems out of the 5,500, 6,000 units that were there. Folks ran with them 36 units, and all of a sudden, Howard, every building on the campus had mold and bursting pipes, and all the students were sleeping on the yard in tents. And so people ran with that narrative. So just think, if all that happened, right, now imagine when the next cohort of people apply to some of these universities, because if everybody all of a sudden is going to flock to the HBCUs now, they're not in a capacity to even accommodate all those students. Because again, going back, 1954, Brown versus Board of Education, we now have access to majority institutions. A lot of people leave HBCUs. A lot of HBCUs sell off a lot of property because they were losing enrollment, they were losing money. And again, you know, real estate is expensive, rent is expensive, owning a lot of buildings is expensive. A lot of these HBCUs sold property and land back to the state, back to the city. And then we get to about the late 1980s and early 90s, enrollment at HBCUs skyrocket thanks to shows like A Different World or The Cosby Show, or even the reference to HBCUs on a lot of shows like Martin and Living Single and Fresh Prince and everything else like that. And in addition to, I just think the effects of Reaganomics just gave a lot of Black folks a wake-up call. Okay, Reagan is the same person who in year one decided he was cutting funding from 83 programs, year one, right? So you get this influx of the HBCU population, but now the HBCUs are not in a capacity to even manage and, you know, accommodate all of these people because, hey, they don't even have the same amount of property and the same amount of space. They don't have the same endowments they once had. Now, fortunately, as we've come into later years, some HBCUs have been able to come into a lot of funding. Howard is one. It does piss off a lot of other folks who feel like, you know, they're not the only HBCU. That's another conversation for another day. But understand that you're going to see a lot of HBCUs start to struggle with accommodating the influx that people are projecting that they think may hit. Now, I agree with going to HBCUs. That's where I'm 100% team HBCU around here. But like I said before, I understand why we also go to other institutions. A mess. Anyway, and that's the other part that got me with this. The fact that, yeah, we'll use the racial quota when it comes to the military. Yeah, y'all can go get shot. Sure. Come on, sign up. Oh, y'all, come on. Come on. That's it. Freedom. American way. Everybody come on, right? But, you know, when it comes to access to education, and I think the reason why, to recognize education is that door to prosperity. And again, we're not supposed to have that. So wait a minute. Y'all ain't about to come through this door. Y'all need to close that door. We're going to get some legislation. Got that out of here. Absolutely not. Y'all lost your minds thinking you about to get some education. Sure. The nerve. All right. Melody just said it, and even though I just talked about it. People who hate Black Americans absolutely would go to an HBCU for a scholarship. And look at how Nikki Haley talks about Black people when her father worked at an HBCU. Nikki get on my nerves too with that whole little fake name change she has. I think I'm gonna do a video just dragging her and Tim Scott together. They're gonna get a 2-for-1 special, but it ain't gonna be tonight because I got some thoughts on both of them. And it's so funny because Nikki constantly, if you look at her Twitter, she's constantly either saying something about what Obama did wrong and something with Black folks and everything. And it's like you're doing all this shucking and jiving and you're still polling at under 5%. And it's never going to get above 5%. They don't want you. And I said that before. Recognize for people who like to play white adjacent and they're still in that minority bubble, yeah, people will, white America will support you for spewing out the racist, anti-black talking points, but understand that when they can find somebody from their own collective to do exactly what you're doing, they're going to get behind them. So just recognize you will not be the nominee, Nikki. Neither will you, Tim Scott, because at this point, it's going to be between DeSantis and Trump. Likely will be Trump. And white America's so crazy, Trump could be convicted tomorrow and they will still vote for him, right? And again, we've had other people who have been pretty much, incarcerated and still had options to serve in office. Like we had, there was one guy who ran, what's his name? I don't know if I wrote it down. Eugene. I forgot what's his first name? He ran for president while he was in jail. Let me find his name real quick. Let me see. Eugene, is it Eugene McCarthy? I just want to make sure it's the right one. Ran against Debs. Which Eugene is this? Eugene Victor Debs. That's his name. All right. In jail. He said, I'm still running for president. Y'all ain't about to stop me. Y'all got the game messed up. If you think I'm tapping out, absolutely not. All right. Okay. Exactly, Tyler Hackner. And the effects of the policy is absolutely indisputable. That's the part that I was really leaning towards. So when we talk about if that were the admission question, like, do you belong to a collective that was negatively impacted by policy? Like, and again, policy that was aimed at disenfranchising groups based on their race, like that alone, automatically, there's nothing you can fight against with that because we have too much of a claim, way too much of a claim. Nerdlard said lineage-based claims. Pretty much, and I think that even goes with the same conversation of reparations as well. Pretty RJ444 said, talk about it. Don't leave out the legacies. That's 35% of these colleges. Exactly, like the 35%. And it's not to say that every student who is a legacy student is not supposed to be there or they don't have the qualifications to get in. But understand there's a lot of people who are not even qualified that are getting in. Okay, Bush went to Yale. Bush was a C student and got into Yale, right? What was that thing he said? He said, you fool me once, shame on me. You fool me twice, you can't get fooled again. He became president. Just you said meritocracy is a lie. I agree. And again, when you paint yourself to be the standard, you automatically see anything that you do as good. And you see anything that any other group does as less than. So that's why, like, a lot of folks who are really harping in on this conversation, especially a lot of people in white America, like I said, all I saw all today was merit, 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 merit. And I'm like, okay, y'all really running around here like y'all over here finding cures to cancer in a day. Like, relax. Y'all get uncomfortable just hearing lessons about history and want to take everything out the history books while you talking about merit. All right. Merit. Yeah, my favorite. That was like when Trump wanted Obama's transcripts. Like, Trump, you barely got through school yourself. I like this. Quandale Dingle said, in quotes, but Tyler Perry is famous for, but Tyler Perry is a famous black filmmaker. His response is, so it doesn't matter with me being profiled. Nah. Let me see here. Glass says, Kenny, is that weird guy on Twitter? I think I got him muted. Like, for some, Twitter gets on my nerves. Ever since Elon Musk took over that crap, Twitter is annoying. But I keep seeing some random weird people. I know there's the For You and the following, but that For You side is off the chain. I keep seeing these terrible people with these horrible opinions, and I'm like, let me just mute all y'all. But he says, blacks score lower on tests and are at the bottom of their law class. What do you guys think about that? That should go back to my conversation in the video I did on standardized testing. Boom. Now, I also want to say, one of the things I think we need to also pay attention to if we want to go there since he decided to shake that table is let's talk about the cheating scandals in regards to some of these, these exams. And I'm talking about specifically coming out of the Chinese community here. All right. A Chinese cheating ring at UCLA reveals an industry devoted to helping international students seam grades. Let's just go ahead and read for a quick minute since we're going there. On paper, I cannot even pronounce this name, so I'm just going to call them LJ. LJ was a model student. After moving to the United States from Beijing, he majored in biology at UCLA and volunteered at a Boys and Girls Club. A former teacher, Jose, remembers him as an excellent student and a great person who was easy to get along with. LJ graduated in 2017 and landed a job with the healthcare technology company in Santa Monica. He appeared to be doing everything right. So it came as a surprise when on Tuesday morning in March, federal authorities arrested him on suspicion of facilitating an international cheating ring. According to prosecutors, LJ, along with 4 current and former UCLA students and another student at Cal State Fullerton, helped at least 40 Chinese nationals obtain student visas by fraudulently taking the TOEFL, an English proficiency exam, on their behalf. LJ's ringers would show up to do the testing sites with fake Chinese passports, bearing their own photos, but with the names of the clients. Where they slipped was that the investigations caught up with him. They were charging 39 test registration payments on the credit card. There's another piece in here. This is a long. All right. It's safe to say, though, that Chinese students bear the brunt of the scrutiny. In 2016, Reuters reported that the University of Iowa was investigating at least 30 students, most if not all believed to be Chinese, over allegations of cheating. In 2015, federal prosecutors in Pennsylvania indicted 15 Chinese nationals for standardized test-taking schemes similar to the UCLA case. ACT Inc. and College Board, which owns SAT, frequently delays or cancels scores in Asia when test materials leak. As supply follows demand, an entire industry has sprouted to help Chinese college applicants and students cheat. A Google search yields countless websites offering substitute test-taking services for the SAT, ACT, GRE, and TOEFL. A site called, I'm not even going to say what it is because we're not about to promote it, promises a safe and honest experience for clients and contains numerous screen grabs of chats between the proprietor, who goes by Demon Hunter, it's a name there, offering my services as a test taker. You may need to go to Saudi Arabia for your first mission, he wrote back. I asked how much it would be, how much it paid. He never responded. He could smell a fake a mile away. Indeed, scams in this industry are rampant. It can be hard to find a trustworthy cheater. While researching this story, I paid a Chengdu-based website called, again, we're not giving these people any press, blank, to write an article for me about the problem of international students cheating in the United States. It charged about 11 cents a word. The result was not quite a publication worthy, contained no plagiarism, at least as far as I could detect. It was an A+. I'm going to pause there. That's just one piece. But again, so you have cheating scandals, right? We saw also, when we talk about rich, wealthy white kids and the entire college admission scam that we saw with that, where people were pretending to be athletes and on role teams and, you know, getting people to, you know, fake numbers and tests and everything else like that. But again, for some reason, it was us. It was minding our business. We just be catching strays. And again, this is not to try to go and tear down any group of people, but it's to highlight the hypocrisy that exists and highlight the delusion that's there. Black folks were minding their business, trying to be great. And for the last 20 years, everybody and their mom has been fighting to undo and seam rip any element of progress we have ever made collectively. Because for some reason, anything that we want is apparently undeserved. So, Somebody said, when are we going to stop believing that I think you're saying proximity. Proximity to whiteness is the standard. When are we going to stand up and say we demand that our education institutions are enough? It goes back to what I said about the HBCUs. Again, just at this point, we don't have the capacity to even accommodate everybody. And it's not saying, and for me, it's not the idea of thinking that you have to go to a majority institution to be successful. One of the critiques with HBCUs right now is because of the cost. Some of them are so expensive, and yes, they are created in a space where it's supposed to help a lot of Black Americans, but a lot of them are in a space where they're priced, you're priced out. You can't even afford it if you want to go, right? Even when I look at, like, you know, my alma mater, like, the price has doubled since I finished undergrad. And so it's like, you know, it comes into a space of recognizing that a lot of times majority institutions are in a space where they can provide funding. Like, I just saw the article about Duke, you know, offering pretty much free tuition to any family that is, you know, let me see, I have it right here. You know, I'll be having my articles ready. Let me see, it says Duke will offer free tuition to, dang man, stupid. No, I'm not paying. I'll just read the title then. Duke will offer free tuition to North and South Carolina students who qualify, all right? And this is for families with incomes of $150,000 or less. So a lot of HBCUs are not in a capacity to even offer something like that. And if we want to go really, really deep, one of the reasons why would be the conversation around sports teams. So recognize again, going back to 54, or I'm sorry, 55, 50, I'm getting my years wrong, 54. So going back to 54, when you have everything that happens in regards to integrating the schools, HBCUs pretty much lose their athletic programs because all of the students get recruited to these majority institutions because the majority institutions already have a bigger endowment. They have more money to spend, more money to play around with. And so these majority institutions build their entire sports programs in the 60s, in the 70s, in the 80s on the backs of Black athletes. It generates millions and millions and millions, right? And it really helps a lot of these institutions become even bigger and better than what they were in the past in regards to resources, facilities, opportunities, the different programs, the fellowships, and everything else that is offered, right? And so when you just look at, and especially when you get into the conversation of television rights, that's an even bigger conversation, right? And so a lot of HBCUs, again, when we talk sports, it's no secret Black people are like some of the most athletic people on the planet. It makes no sense that a lot of HBCU sports programs are very underfunded. It doesn't mean that the talent is not there, but again, people recruit and go to the majority institutions. And so with that being said, there are billions of dollars that have been, accumulated at majority institutions because of Black athletes. And this is mainly because a lot of Black athletes left their HBCUs or did not go to HBCUs after Brown for Sport Education because there were better opportunities in regards to access to resources. And again, even when you want to have the conversation of D1 and the possibility of getting into NFL for a lot of folks, a lot of HBCU programs for football are not D1. Same for basketball. It's not all of them, but there's some. And so I think it's a nuanced conversation. It's not a one size fits all with it. But I do agree with the idea that thinking proximity to whiteness creates a greater experience. I think that's a conversation for anything. Like, I don't see that as, and that's not my end goal. Like, proximity to whiteness does nothing for me. I'm good. Like, you know what I mean? And so I think that it's a nuanced conversation. There's layers to it. But I agree with the sentiment on that. And yeah, HBCUs need more funding. And this is why even when we talk politics, I just said this on the last live, right? So I know a lot of folks are sick of the current administration, but had that budget and the bill that they wanted to get through would have passed. Let me make sure I get the numbers right this time because I think I had it wrong last time. Let me see. Youth funding. What's my number here? What's the thing I want? Where's it at? I just want to make sure it's right. Proposal. What was the proposal? There was a proposal, but it did not get passed. It was in the billions, of course. Okay. Biden's HBCU funding proposal falls from 45 billion to 2 billion. Now, initially, going back to that budget, when they had the second half of the Build Back Better program and everything in regards to helping to boost the economy and pretty much the dream bill that they were trying to push, 45 billion would have gone to HBCUs. However, you already know who the other side was, who was in charge with that. And they were like, we're not budging on that. And then you got Cinema in the way, you got Manchin in the way, and they want to reach across the middle and be friends with everybody. And the GOP was not budging on that. And so they had to keep going and doing a reconciliation and another reconciliation and another reconciliation. And 45 billion dropped to 2 billion, right? HBCUs need more funding. But again, it's a bigger conversation. You're going to need a lot of these lunatics to get out of office. That's why I keep saying they're cementing everything. Some of the folks kept trying to say, elections have consequences. And some people's response to that was, well, Hillary won the popular vote and no Republican aside. I think one Republican in the last 8 elections has actually won the popular vote. And so they were making that argument. But in response to that as well, you have to also go into the conversation of what happens at the state and local elections and at our senates and everything like that. So yes, you have currently a Democrat who was in office, but you have to look at who's in the Senate. You have to look at who's in the House. You have to look at what happened on local levels. And you have to look at the fact that when it comes to even the Supreme Court justices, they are appointed. And even with them being appointed, they still have to be voted on by the Senate, right? And so it's just like layer after layer after layer. All of this ties together. Everything is cemented in. That's why I always say this is just not the time to tap out, because there are so many. You can just link to everything links back to race anyway, but you can just link all of this stuff together. We are not going to make it through all my topics tonight. That's okay. We're going to make this work. Gray Matter said HBCUs are still underfunded. Yeah, that's my point. Even with all the money that Howard's got, they're still underfunded. All right. Like, just understand, like, when you talk about a lot of these great schools like Fisk and Bethune-Cookman and Payne College and all of these schools, like there's a lot of them. There needs to be more that's given to them in regards to them being in a space to do what they need to do, right? But you know, that's where we're at. Um, a lot of you guys are agreeing with my whole two times is better. Gray Matter said had to perform 500% just to be equal. Then they still got a problem with it. It's funny, like a perfect example. I don't care what you think about Obama. I got my smoke for him with a lot of things, but it's interesting to see the contrast between an Obama and a Trump, right? Two different planets, right? Um, um, Southern Belgium Pete said race was never the problem, but they're about to see some of these. Yeah, listen again, folks. Folks are about to find out. Some of the folks who rally behind us, y'all gonna learn. All right, because also I'm anxious to see how much what schools are about to shift. Because with this ruling, it wasn't saying automatically every school must take it out of their policy, but it means schools now have the agency to say, hey, we don't want to include this in how we do admission. So I'm anxious to see which schools are going to be like, nope, 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 and pull all that out. And then I'm anxious to see the enrollment in regards to demographics for like the next 5-6 years. Watch how everything starts to shift. Exactly. Just blame us for blame it on me. Um, this is a good question. I agree with all you're saying, Calvin. I'm at a point now that as $1 trillion buying power, why can't we put those monies to fund our own political party? Put even people in the political. Well, so here's the thing with that. $1 trillion in buying power is great, but honestly, when you put it in the pool with other demographics, it's not a lot. Hold on. I just want to have my number right. Let's look at the buying power by race versus ethnicity. I just want to pull up a chart here. I'm about sick of these dang paywalls, man. Everybody wants you to pay to read their article. Oh my god. All right, let me find a different one. They're about to piss me off. um, dang, you got one too. See, they must be watching this live right now. They blocking all these websites for me. Okay, that's no, I don't want that one. Okay, so right now, as it's projected that by 2025, right? Black buying power will be about 1.9 trillion. White buying power will be 17 trillion, right? And so the point that I'm getting at is that buying power that we have, we also don't have savings. And it's not everybody, but a lot of us don't have savings. A lot of us don't have a cushion that we're sitting on. A lot of us are the first generation to possibly come out of debt, right? A lot of us are in a capacity where because we did not benefit from the Homestead Act, we like all those programs I named earlier, that generational wealth, it never seems to really jump to the next generation. A lot of us are just now coming into a space where, as maybe the matriarchs of the family pass on, we're finally just getting that first insurance check, because even with insurance, we weren't allowed to have policies until almost, 40, 50 years ago, right? And so, again, that conversation of that trillion, that would mean everything that we have to go into something. And recognize that at this point in time, when you're having a presidential election, they're pretty much, each campaign pretty much spends almost $1 trillion. So the challenge with that would be, if Black Americans decided collectively all to put their trillion into whatever candidate, we're still 13% of the population, and we're not even, and with that being said, you still would need buy-in from other groups of people. The challenge that we run into with voting as Black people is that we don't even get to vote for what we want. We have to vote for what we don't want to lose. Like, we have to vote. Our voting is a defense mechanism. We even have to consider and think about how white people operate when we make our decisions. That's why I think a lot of times when you're talking about the primaries and the caucuses, there's a lot of candidates that have really cool platforms, but we collectively already know white America's not getting behind that. So people tend to go and get behind somebody that they think is safe. That's pretty much how Joe got in there, right? I was saying that when he announced, I said, damn. Like, go back to them lives when he said he was running. I was like, no, but it is what it is. But again, it was understanding that a lot of the other candidates who did, some had pretty decent, platforms and everything. Black people just be knowing, like, white America's not budging with that. They're not, that's too much against the status quo. And so we can have another conversation on our politics. I'm not going to do it tonight, but I totally agree with the idea of us being a bit more politically engaged. But I still hold on to the idea of, like I said, using third party to gain leverage out of one of the two major parties. But I also want to say, when it comes to third party, I think people should also be cautious, because I think sometimes a lot of people just blindly vote third party because they're mad at the other two. And sometimes that third party candidate sometimes is worse than the main two that's up there. Or sometimes they don't really have a great platform at all. They're just not one of the two. And so people get behind them. So I think you have to also be careful with that as well. Third party doesn't always mean that they're a better candidate. So even if you're going to go third party, pay attention to who that candidate is. My argument is more so just saying, creating a coalition of a third party that has a large enough representation where if one of the major two parties does not have support from that third party, they can't win. And you use that as leverage to get what you want. But that would be how I'd approach it. Anyway, yeah, we are not getting to all my topics tonight. That's okay. We're going to do the best we can. 2008 B. Scott said, and propaganda/media will work to make us the face of the problem, when the funny thing is white women benefited heavily. That's always been a conversation. Even when we talk crime, right? Think about even the image of crack, right? Let me pull up my fact real quick. Y'all know I'll be having my facts written down. When we talk about crack, this of all things, but when we talk about crack, where's my numbers at? Where's the number I want? Here we go. So when we talk about the crack epidemic, right? 2/3 of crack users were white. However, they painted black people to be the face of the crack epidemic, right? Think about when you talk about crime and you talk about the war on crime, the war on drugs. Think about how our media will portray things. So think of when you watch, especially back in up until maybe the 2000s, right? If you saw a news report and he started talking about the rise in crime or something, they'd always pan to that shot of random black people standing by the chain link fence, just standing there. They're not doing that. They're just standing, kicking it on the corner. But that would be the image of crime, right? And so what ends up happening is, slowly but surely, people start to buy in the idea that even when we're just standing around, we must be up to no good, right? And this is why a lot of times when folks go into a neighborhood, sometimes if they see black folks standing around, they get nervous. They're nervous to walk past. They don't know if they're going to get robbed. It's almost kind of something that's almost insulated in the mindsets of a lot of people, when you can use imaging to kind of paint the pictures of a lot of folks, right? And so think about just like how, again, with the idea of crack, they painted it to be black folks. You had Bush #1 make up a whole scenario, pretty much set up somebody to do a crack deal right by the White House. And then he goes and does a whole, address to the nation, just down the street, someone sold this. And I'm like, y'all literally just set it up just so you could have a story, right? And again, it would, because really, who painted the picture of it? It's the paint the picture to make it look like it was us that were doing, that was doing all the offending. Like, it's always been that way, right? And so again, imaging and media can play a huge role into a lot of things. And so the same thing happens with education. There's a perception that all of us, again, are just some out-of-pocket crazy kids that don't know anything. And, when they think of black schools, they think of Lean On Me, Fair East Side. All right? Who knows the school song? Oh, of course, Clarence Thomas voted against that crap. By the way, there's a really good podcast I recommend. It is called, and they actually are doing a full series just on Clarence Thomas, and you would be shocked at his experience, because it's crazy. He was not always an idiot, or he wasn't always, I'm not going to call him F that, he is one right now. He was not always one to sell us out. He used to actually be on the right side of history. Then he got into some of those spaces. So the podcast is called... What is it? Wait, they're up to episode 8 now. I'm behind. Hold on, I got to catch up on the episodes. Okay, so it's called Slow Burn. It's through Slate Podcast, right? Right now they have about 8 episodes, but it is going through the experience of Clarence Thomas, his experience as a kid, his experience at the university system when he first gets into law, some of the legislation he got behind, his dating life, everything. He has a very interesting story. But no, Clarence, you pull him out of the sunken place, please. Somebody. All right. All right. Okay, we gotta move on because I'm gonna be here all night. Um, all right. If I'm skipping your comments, please forgive me. Somebody said HBCUs don't have alumni give back like PWIs. I think in response to that, some of that to an extent is true, but then also understand like for a lot of HBCU students, some of them are the first or the second generation to graduate, and they're also taking care of their families when they get out. Like there's a lot of people in the Black collective who they're taking care of their parents, they're taking care of siblings, they're taking care of cousins. There's just not any money to go around to give back, or if they do give back, it's not these massive lump sums. Like understand that for a lot of white Americans, especially those who are from the upper echelons of white America, who actually came from money, you know, their money goes long. They got old money. They're like, I knew a person who I remember when they were buying their house. They're like, yeah, so my parents, they just paid our down payment. I was like, okay, well, how much was the down payment? Oh, it was like 70,000. Okay, all right. Interesting. Like, I mean, some families just have it, right? And so you have a lot of people, like, especially with majority institutions, their money runs so long. And again, some of that money comes from slavery. Let's talk about Georgetown University selling off some slaves to keep the university open, right? But, a lot of them come from long money and old money, right? And so there's a space where they can continue to fund. I remember, like, my aunt went to Georgetown Law, and I remember I went to an event because she was being honored, and they were doing the alumni give backs. And I remember the different classes. They had like 5 or 6 different law classes, and each class was given like $4 or $5 or $6 million. And an interesting one because this was maybe 2018, and it was like, oh, the class of 2016 is donating. I forgot how many millions. I'm like, dang, y'all making that kind of money like that already? Damn. All right, but yeah, I think again, like everything again goes back to a certain origin. The issues that we have now would not exist had things been made right in the past, and they weren't. Instead, the flaws just continue to be exemplified and enhanced, and now we're just now getting to a space where you're trying to right the wrongs, but some stuff is so embedded and locked in. And again, that conversation of generational wealth and compound wealth is something serious. You know what I mean? It goes back to what I say even when it comes to Black businesses and how so many run into a challenge from transitioning from mom and pop to industry to corporation, right? Because that seed was never there. They didn't get to be like the former president say, my father gave me a small loan of $1 million. Okay, my mom would be cussing me out if I asked her for $20. What? $20? No, I'm just kidding. But man. Okay, you guys responded to the buying power, but yeah, pretty much with buying power, most of that goes back into our bills. Most of that goes back into paying for everything else. Like think about how many people we know who have grandparents or relatives that pass and they don't even have insurance for the funeral, and now you got to raise money to pay for it. That's the experience for a lot of people. I don't think people really realize just how financially strained a lot of Americans are in this country. And I think it's because with social media, we see the best of the best of the best of everybody's experience. And people are really out of the loop sometimes with just how, and this is not directed at anybody in the chat, I'm just taking it general, just how like destitute a lot of people in America are in regards to finances, in regards to just keeping a roof over their head. You know what I mean? All right. Lauren said a lot of us are first generation removed from poverty, which previous generations African Americans. I'm sorry, let me read that again. A lot of us are the first generation removed from poverty, in which the previous generation got African Americans to facilitate economic mobility. Mm-hmm. And then a lot of us, yeah, a lot of folks are paycheck to pay. I'm still paycheck to paycheck. I mean, if I miss a paycheck, I'll be okay. I can still focus and all, but like, or I can still survive, but I ain't doing that great. Um, yeah, my money's decent, but I ain't rich. I tell you that. So they said, I hear you, but we have it. I'm sorry. It says, hello, Calvin. I hear you, but what do we have? Oh, I guess they're saying, what do we have to lose? Your comment got chopped off a little bit. I don't know if that's what you're asking, so I don't want to answer that unless I see the full context of what you're asking. By the way, don't be fooled by this Robert Kennedy dude. Okay, that's another one of the little Joe Rogan. That's like a Joe Rogan, Trump, rich person that's gonna just run on a Democrat platform and pretend that all of a sudden he's for the people. Don't fall for it. Somebody said Biden's son smokes crack. Y'all going after people. Listen, it's so funny when people bring up Hunter as a rebuttal. I know this person's not saying that. This is in response to my conversation about crack, but it's always funny when like I'm talking about like something super serious and then they bring, well, what about Hunter Biden's laptop? What does that have to do with reparations? Like, if y'all want to lock up Hunter Biden, go ahead and lock him up. All right, balance the system out because there's too many of us up in there. So put some of them up in there. Like, man. Okay, we have got to move on. So, okay, what else do I want to talk about? There's a few other stories. I don't even want to talk about this one now because I feel like it's so far off the Richter. Let me jump to the other one. All right, we're going to do a little bit of reading really quick. All right, so again, remember our conversation of eminent domain. Let's talk about Joesphine Wright. All right, kids, let's read for a second. So this land has been in her family since the Civil War. Now she's fighting to keep it. In quotes, I wanted to leave a legacy for our family, 93-year-old Joesphine Wright said. A 93-year-old South Carolina woman is fighting to keep her property after a developer filed a lawsuit in what she believes is an attempt to force her to sell the land that's been in her family since the end of the Civil War. Joesphine Wright was approached by developer Bailey Point Investment Group in May, asking her to sell her property to make way for a 27-acre, 147-unit development on Hilton Head Island called Bailey's Cove. Wright refused. I want to leave a legacy for our family, she told me. The construction had begun last year with no warning, according to Wright's granddaughter, Sharice Graves. Unbeknownst to us, they just started tearing trees down, you know. Our house was shaking like an earthquake. They didn't even have the decency to let us know that this was happening, Graves said in a press conference. The developer sued after Wright refused them, alleging a shed, satellite dish, and Wright's back porch encroaches on the land where they plan on developing Bailey's Cove. They claim those items significantly delayed and hindered development, according to court documents. Graves says they paid over $2,000 to move the shed. The back porch is still standing. In a countersuit, Wright alleges Bailey Point Investment Group began a consistent and constant barrage of tactics of intimidation, harassment, trespassing to bully the 93-year-old into making the sale. She claims trash has been left on her property, her tires have been slashed, and that a snake was placed on her bedroom window. The developers have questioned if Wright owns the property at all, according to the Island Packet, and attempted to go through other family members to force a sale. This has been very stressful, but in a way redeeming due to the fact that there was such a positive response to this injustice from people all over the world, Wright said. She's seen far too much in her life to go back down. I pretty much have been a fighter all my life, Wright told WSAV TV. Oh, that's in Savannah. I used to watch that. I guess they figured I would become so unnerved with the harassment that I would say, take it. But they don't know me. I'm here to fight for what I have. This fight is not a new one for those living in the South Carolina Low Country. The Gullah Geechee, direct descendants of Central and West African slaves who were experts in cultivating rice and indigo crops and stayed on the coastline, have been fighting eager developers looking to capitalize on their ancestral lands for tourism for decades now. These developments led residents to form the Jonesville Preservation Society, a group that works to slow the overdevelopment in the Hilton Head community and protect the environmentally sensitive marshes and wetlands. Once we did some investigation, we found that this 147-unit development was going in and had already been approved before anyone knew about it. Kelly LeBlanc, a member of the Jonesville Preservation Society, explained to WSAV TV. We don't have the right to change what has already been approved. That ship has sailed. We can't change the zoning. The family has reached out to the developer to no avail. More disrespectful than a no is a non-response. So we're asking the community to join us in action. Write letters to the developer, call the developer. Civil rights attorney Bakari Sellers said during a press conference. We're asking them to pray for this family. We're asking the community to not let this die. The developer has not responded to multiple requests for a comment from several outlets. Wright has lived on the property for over 30 years. The land was given to Wright after the death of her husband, Gullah Geechee Islander Samuel Wright, in the late 1990s. His ancestors were freed by Union soldiers. The property has been passed down from generation to generation for over 100 years, becoming a sanctuary for Wright. With her 7 children, 40 grandchildren, 50 great-grandchildren, and 16 great-great-grandchildren. This property is like a sanctuary. We come to grandma's house for holidays, fellowship, funerals, barbecues. To try and take that away is taking away from our entire family, Graves said. Generational wealth is extremely important, Wright told me. Both my husband and I wanted to leave a legacy for our family so that our future descendants can enjoy living on the same property as their ancestors did 150 years ago. The family has launched a fundraiser to help with legal fees, property taxes, and the construction of a fence between the new development and Wright's property. Any other funds will go toward a college fund for her grandchildren and her great-grandchildren, who hope to continue visiting their loved ones' home. NBA star Kyrie Irving has reportedly donated $40,000 to the cause. All of them want to be able to live and visit this property as it is convenient for them and a family in a private way. Our effort is to make sure we keep this property, Wright said. We need to make sure that it is known that it is historical, and we want to keep our property within the family and not try to be harassed to sell it. So this is our fight. The 93-year-old has but one request for the developer. All I ever wanted to live in peace on my own property and to be left alone. So we've had this conversation many, many times, and you're watching it in real time. Now, remember, we've talked about how eminent domain can sometimes be utilized and weaponized against Black landowners. In addition to sometimes, again, developers will just come into certain spaces and they will, get the zoning permits and do everything. And there will be one person who's a holdout. And eventually, they will push and jump into years and years of litigation and usually eventually still get their way and get the property. That's what we're seeing right now. And I've said this before. It's in... I want to say it's in one of my In the News episodes where I talk about the Black farmers and that $4 billion settlement that never came. But we talk about how even a lot of the malls, shopping centers, freeways, developments that we've seen, a lot of times came at the expense of Black neighborhoods. We know for sure the freeway system came and pretty much destroyed a lot of neighborhoods. We saw that with what happened in Miami, as far as like Liberty City and everything else like that. We've seen that in pretty much every major metropolitan city. But again, even when we talk about the conversation of Heirs land, you notice how they went and it said that the developers tried to go and find other family members who were willing to sell. See, that goes back to that conversation of how Heirs land can be divided. They wanted to make sure that it wasn't, they were trying to make sure it wasn't Heirs land, because if it was, they probably could have got one person to sell and then she loses the entire property. Just like I said on the last slide, if we have a diagram and this is the land and it's split, 16 ways on here with Heirs land, because it's not recognized by the government as far as being an actual deed and it's something that's passed down from family to family. If I have 16 plots of land and one relative and all the relatives live on their own plot, if one relative decides to sell their plot, technically they've sold the entire thing. And a lot of people didn't know that. So a lot of Black farmers and landowners in the 1800s, 1900s, even in modern times, have lost a lot of land because of policies like that. But what's interesting is, again, you see the nonsense, and they're going to try to outbuy this woman. And it goes to show that a lot of times when people even want to make developments or do everything, look at who's always at the expense. They will come and tear our stuff down quick, right? If you take a look at what has happened to something like Hilton Head, if you look at Hilton Head from 1950 and you look at it today, it's unrecognizable because they've pretty much taken the land from everybody who once was there, right? It's pretty much all golf courses and resorts and everything else that's over there now. And so just recognize, it goes back to what we talked about, which was actually, it's going to segue me right into my next conversation. And then I'm going to take a break and read some more comments. Again, our conversation about Black farmers. So I want to go to this article. This is coming out of Essence, right? Dang it. Okay. Black farmers have lost their land at alarming rates. New documentary highlights why and the push for preservation. American Black Film Festival picked Gaining Ground, which I can't wait to watch and review. The fight for Black land puts the spotlight on land ownership challenges faced by Black farmers. Now, this article just came out last week. A new documentary about the legacy of Black farming in America is shedding light on the devastating impact of Heirs property. We just talked about that. Also, please note, when we talk about Heirs property as well, with Heirs property, a lot of the rules, especially in a place like South Carolina, the land has to exist as is. So there can be no conversation about commerce, no conversation about starting a business. The land must be as is. That land is also not eligible for FEMA protections after a hurricane or a tornado or flooding. Anyway, has been shedding light on devastating impact of Heirs property, which has been one of the highest contributors to land loss for Black people in America. Gaining Ground, the Fight for Black Land, premieres at this year's American Black Film Festival in Miami Beach on June 15th. It delves into this unique issue and examines its immense impact on Black farmers. Heirs property is property that was passed down through family members by inheritance. According to the USDA, it's done quite frequently without a will or a proper estate planning, which has often led to issues later on because there's no clear proof of ownership by the family members who inherited it. There's another conversation about that, especially when we're coming out of Reconstruction and documentation and things that were purposely lost and purposely destroyed, and how some documents were not recognized, and how, again, we also had a population or a segment of the population that was not very literate, and a lot of folks would be thinking they're signing one thing and really they're signing off the entire land. I think I told the story about what happened with my family and how we're researching and trying to figure out a bunch of different things, but there's a discrepancy in a situation where we had a relative who, one, didn't even know how to sign their name. This is like the 1890s, right? And they pretty much sold off a whole bunch of land and they didn't even know what they were doing. We'll come back to it another day. We're still getting the research on that. So my cousin Tiffany, we need to catch up and get back to where we were at with that. But anyway, let me see. The documentary, created by Al Roker Entertainment and Deere and Company in partnership with Emmy-nominated Eternal Polk, is meant to shine a spotlight on the challenges Black farmers and landowners must navigate in order to preserve their land for future generations. For farmers, land provides more than livelihood, it provides legacy. For far too long, Black farmers had to deal with often coercive constraints, barriers, and systems that result in involuntary loss of land, economic value, and wealth, said Mark Halsey, Senior Advisor, Office of the Chairman of the Deere Company, in a press release. This documentary provides an opportunity for folks to tell their stories, highlight injustice, and hopefully serve as a catalyst for concerted action to address the little-known but important pervasive issue. Much like several social and economic issues impacting Black communities, heirs property has been a long-standing issue dating back to the end of the Civil War. Under the Homestead Act, which we talked about earlier, many Black Americans also became landowners when the government handed over some 20 million acres, mostly in the South. In fact, by 1920, Black families owned 14% of all the farmland in the U.S., a figure that has fallen to less than 2% today. When land is passed down to family members by inheritance but without will or a deed, it can be difficult for the heirs to get the same benefits as others, such as government assistance, without proof that they own the land. The inability to effectively prove ownership can also force partition sales by third parties, right? Unfortunately, this phenomenon disproportionately affects African American families throughout the South. Heirs property accounts for approximately 33% of land owned by Black people, according to the Department of Agriculture. It's the leading cause of Black involuntary land loss, and it has led to a 90% decline in Black-owned farmland nationwide between 1910 and 1997. The message of this documentary is clear. We need to do more to help Black farmers and landowners unlock the tremendous value in the land they already own to help us feed, clothe, and shelter a growing population while pursuing opportunities to build wealth and provide legacy for future generations. Essence has had the chance to speak with the director, Polk. Okay, I think we'll pause because I got most of what I need on here. Anyway, we'll definitely, actually, there's only a little bit left. I'll keep reading. Let me give the director his just due. Essence had a chance to speak with the director, Polk and landowner Michael J. Robinson, ahead of the documentary's world premiere to discuss the current state of heirs rights and how Black landowners can reclaim their legacy and create generational wealth. Polk, who had long been advocating to work on a project about Black farmers, shared how he wasn't the person originally slated to direct the film, but was thrilled to be able to helm this documentary. Robinson revealed how his family initially placed more sentimental value on their land, not some of the monetary opportunities that were. This journey that we've been on through heirs property really highlighted for us the value of being able to monetize land and create wealth for the family. And this should not be overlooked, he said. Speaking on heirs property, Polk said, "It's an injustice to Black folks, adding a lot of people that don't understand how vulnerable their property is." Robinson echoed this sentiment, saying it really humanizes the issue. "I didn't realize how close we came to actually losing our family's land. So this documentary creates more awareness around the issue." Polk also commented on how prevalent this issue is, and the same sort of tactics are being utilized in New York City when people pass on and leave their house without a clear title. Ultimately, Polk hopes to bring more awareness to this issue with the documentary, stating that it's about reclaiming our wounds, reclaiming our land, reclaiming our opportunities, and hopefully it's a resource for healing, with Robinson aptly closing out the conversation by saying it's about reclaiming our birthright. So again, policy, when we talk about communities negatively affected by detrimental policy. That's another example where, again, when we talk about, again, black people losing black farmers losing 90% of their land between 1910 and 1970. Okay, that's not just because race happens. That's not just a race thing. It's a race thing backed by policy. You know what I mean? It goes back to, and to go deeper with that farmer conversation, what ended up happening is a lot of those farms that were not, seen as a lot of those farms that were heirs property were not eligible for the USDA programs, which meant that they would not be eligible for the resources that would come with farming. And so automatically they're competing against other farms that are USDA farms that have all the resources that they don't. If you have 200 acres of land, you're going to need some seed money to harvest and plant and cultivate, and you're going to need to bring on staff and everything else like that. Those USDA programs and those loans and those benefits, that's what people would utilize to help make that come into fruition. But a lot of black farmers weren't eligible for that. And so now you have all this land that you can barely do a lot of, do any work on. So if you already didn't have some kind of seed money, it was a challenge. And then you run into the other issue where even when it comes to selling what your harvest is, what your produce is, a lot of businesses will not do business with farms that are not USDA approved, which is why this is how we got into what was supposed to be the $4 or $5 billion settlement coming from the Biden administration to kind of remedy and hold farmers that were labeled as disenfranchised. They didn't put race in it because, again, going back to that 1999 lawsuit, they couldn't just prove racism, but you could prove the idea of disenfranchised. So the conversation of disenfranchised would include majority black farmers, but also some additional farmers that were left out. And of course, we saw what happened. White farmers sued and said, oh, no, again, this is racial discrimination. You see how folks like to do wordplay? And so even though they got bailouts, right? So when we had the previous administration, and I feel like sometimes we have this conversation a million times, but it's fine. I'll do it again. Previous administration, he decided to go into all the trade wars with China and the tariffs and this and that. American farmers got their behinds kicked. American farmers started filing for bankruptcy at an enormously high rate, very alarming. And so Trump administration needed to bail out American farmers. However, the farmers that were not eligible, a lot of times were farms that were not USDA approved, which meant majority of the time it was black farmers. So white farmers got bailouts. They got money from the government, right? Black farmers didn't. Biden administration is like, all right, we got to make these people whole too. So this is what we're going to propose for them. White farmers said, oh no, they start suing, and now it's still in litigation into court. Black farmers said, okay, well, y'all want to sue, we going to sue too. So now they're suing the Biden administration like, y'all said this is what we're supposed to get. We haven't gotten it yet. And it kind of goes back to that same conversation about the two houses hit by the tornado, right? One house definitely needs some resources. Another house already got their resources and doesn't even need it. And then there's another house that wasn't minding their business and got pissed off because there's a possibility that one house just might get a piece of something, and so they want to sue. So it's just like you see everything work full circle. The way that race and policy and politics just all tie together, and there's always an origin story to all of the foolery. That's the nonsense we're talking about in these parts. You know what I mean? I'm going to read some comments because I did a whole lot of reading here. Don't worry, when I finally get my new MacBook, I'm going to definitely start using a different service so I can just post these articles on the screen as opposed to y'all watching me read. Anyway. It's already 11:30. Dang. I see my friend on here. Yeah, and we paid her nothing. Remember that from Bringing Down the House when Mrs. What's her name? God, I forgot the lady's name. Whatever her name was. But she was talking about Ivy, and we paid her nothing. She was so wonderful. Anyway. Somebody said all the ones buying up the brownstones, etc., their parents and great-grandparents gave them the down payment. Yeah, you see a lot of folks who have that kind of money. And that was foreign to me. I had no idea that was even a thing. Like, I was like, dang, folks really be having money like that. Okay. Let me see here. Perfect example, side note. You guys remember how, I don't think it's there now, but on the National Mall in DC, this is when COVID was still really kicking everybody's behind. On the National Mall, they had a flag planted in the grass for each person that had passed from COVID. And so at the time, I think there was about 600,000 flags on the National Mall. And so this is when I still work with the kids. They had an opportunity to interview the person that was in charge of that project. And so, we get invited not to, their office, but to their home, right? So they have this super wealthy penthouse sits on. First of all, none of the buildings in DC are tall. Nothing is more than 14 or 15 stories. But anyway, we're on the 15th story. But the 15th story in DC is like the 100th story in New York. So we're on the 15th story of this little penthouse with this very wealthy woman, and she was like, I felt we needed to do something, and I said, you know what, I want to plant 600,000 flags on the National Mall. And so I told my husband to make a call, and he made a call. So the husband made a call, and it happened. I was just like, some of these people are so connected. Like, she was like, yeah, because I'm an artist, and I just love to do things that I'm passionate about. And I thought it was a great project and all, but I was just like, dang, the way that some people are just connected, like it's a snap of a finger, they make things happen, right? Because again, they just come from spaces where wealth and access to prosperity is just at their feet. They don't even have to do much to get to it. I was like, man. Let me see. So Calvin, I rock with you, but I'm not understanding why you're not speaking on entities in place for us like NAACP, the National Black Caucus, and how they allow monies for HBCUs to diminish. Well, one, me personally, the NAACP ain't doing a whole lot for us. They've decided that because, okay, again, with their namesake, because it's the National Advancement for Colored People, right? They've included everybody in that conversation. And to me, the NAACP just doesn't have that much power. They really don't. And when we talk about the Black Caucus, they get the same smoke I've had for a long time. A lot of them have been in there forever. They're not doing anything. And really, one of the flaws I think that happens in a lot of Black politics is Black politics, we take on everybody's burden. Everybody's, right? So, they have jumped, especially the CBC, they've jumped into, they've jumped into the immigration conversation. They've jumped into all of these other different groups and everything else. And it's kind of like sometimes we're the back burner policy. They're not worried about us. And so when you talk about how did they allow the monies for HBCUs to diminish, the money was never there to begin with. That's really the conversation. It was never there. And when it comes to advocating to get more funding and everything else like that, there's just challenges that are going to exist because, again, you're going against a status quo that does not want you to prosper anyway. And a lot of times when HBCUs do come into some money, they have to almost compromise their values in order to get, some of the money that they do get, which is why as we're starting to look in modern times, HBCUs are starting to get a lot more whiter and a lot more non-Black, if we want to really go there. Okay, you're starting to see a lot of HBCUs make compromises in order to get, some leverage. So personally, the NAACP, for me, is more so symbolic at this point. I think they do have lawyers that are out there and fighting the fight, but I think the overall mission, because they've decided to take on the issues of everybody, because again, the definition, when you talk about, again, advancement of colored people, right? I think in the initial area really specifically meant us. And now that's kind of, it's kind of that same conversation when you start going from the conversation of Black to minority and you include everybody. And this is not to say that other people should not get what they fight for, but what's happened is because a lot of our groups have taken on everybody's burden, Black people become collateral. It's kind of one of the critiques I've always had about just the Democrat Party in general as well, where, and by the way, I've always said this, don't let your disappointment for the Democrat Party allow a pass for Republicans to do the nonsense they do. But I've said one of the things that's always worked against the Democrat Party is they marketed themselves as the hero party, the party that will take on everybody's issue and come to us, we can protect you. And so the problem is they have so many groups that they have to fight and protect. And all of those groups don't even see on the same page. And some of those groups actually fight each other. And because of that, the support and the resources ends up getting spread and stretched very, very thin. And really the groups that get what it is that they want either already have some money or have some kind of leverage or some kind of stake in regards to where, the party will kind of prioritize them. And a lot of times, again, when it comes to Black folks, we tend to get left in the shadows. And then even when you talk about the CBC, there's even distinctions within the CBC, because then you also have members of the CBC where they're looking at it from a more international standpoint. So they're also saying, well, this is what we also need to do on the continent of Africa. And this is what we need to do in the Caribbean. And this is what we need to do for Afro Latinos. And it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And so Black Americans, in my specific opinion, if we're going to talk about distinguishing between lineage, and this is not to start a war or anything like that, I personally don't think Black Americans really have any group that really advocates specifically for the plight of Black Americans that's currently in power And when I say there's groups that exist, there's groups that are starting movements, but as far as groups that are in power that really can implement and shift and influence policy and get things done, I don't see any groups right now, because you need to have hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars to really make any kind of movement politically. Now, you can have a lot of grassroots organizations that are doing a lot of really great work and doing great work on a local level. But as far as like an overall group that really fights and claws to ensure that we are a part of the conversation, and it's not about just being a part of the conversation and being in the room, but being a part of the conversation from a standpoint of our plight is going to be respected. We're going to be made whole. Nobody's going to come after us with a bunch of random policy because their stuff isn't together. And when it comes to housing, education, we are in the room. You know what I mean? We're not seen as a burden that needs to be, okay, let's just give them something so they'll shut up. So I just don't see the NAACP and I don't see the CBC as our biggest backers. And even when you look at some of the people who've been in there for years and 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 even more years, in the same way that I agree with term limits and everything else like that, there's some folks who have been in charge of Black districts for years. And I mean, some of them are trying to do a little something here and there, but a lot of them don't be doing nothing. Right, but they don't let it be CBC week in DC. Everybody, it'd be a million parties out here. Parties be lit. Then they go right back to doing the same nonsense. So you need some new faces in there. And again, I think really money has to come into the picture. Real money. I'm talking some buku money, right? It's just not there. When you talk about all these super PACs and stuff that exist in politics, I've already said money needs to come out of politics. But until it does, you might as well play the same game and put the money into politics so that, Black people actually have groups that are actually fighting and advocating for them on the Hill and in these lobbying groups and everything else like that. But it goes back again to the conversation of like cash flow. We just collectively don't have it. Yes, we have a Black 1%. We have a Black 5%. But that 1%, it's almost like looking at McDonald's versus Checkers, right? Checkers makes great food. There's Checkers, they're successful. But when you put them in a room at McDonald's and the amount of revenue and what the bottom line is for McDonald's, it pales in comparison. That's kind of where the Black dollar is in regards to its influence in politics. Sucks, but that's just what happens. A lot of this is generational. And so, again, in my opinion, NAACP, they're doing what they can do, but a lot of it, to me, is a bit more symbolic. It's the same way you get Al Sharpton to show up at everything and march and sing, and all of that is great, but you just start to wonder if you keep seeing the same people for 30 years and ain't that much change, and now you're seeing things go backwards. It's a whole bunch of different conversations, and it's not to blame and attack them. It just goes to show that that's how strong that system is, right? All right. Let's see. Nathan Moore said, I pray she has a living will and a trust. That's for Joesphine. I pray she got it too. Mm-hmm. Let me see. BET, I don't remember what the series was called. They had a series one time, and one of the episodes was about Heirs land. I can't remember what it was called to save my life, but it was actually a really good episode. If I could remember what it was called, I would tell you guys to check it out. It's very informative in regards to kind of helping you understand how all of that works. And another thing to also think about too is litigation. And I think somebody just said that on here too. Good job, 2008 B Scott. You were saying exactly what I was just thinking. The litigation is so costly that the person probably even pressured to sell just to cover all the associated fees and whatnot. And I want to go to even a bigger conversation. Even when it comes to fighting for all of these different things, litigation is costly. Okay, listen, your former president right now is using them campaign donation funds to pay his legal fees. But understand that a lot of times just the litigation and the back and forth, like people, even our court system is so screwed up where, you can keep having an issuing a stay and a pushback and this and a that and a that and a this, and you still have to pay all these lawyers. So when they push whatever back, oh, we're going to push this back to August, we're going to push this to November, this is going to go to this court. Oh, well, you lost this case, we're going to go to the appellate court. And well, did you do this? It didn't go that well. Now we're going to go to this court. Like all of that even costs money too. So recognize that, again, even when we're fighting these fights, like all of this stuff takes money to get stuff done. Money rules this country, right? Money is what makes the United States become what it is. And if you don't have it, it is very hard to get a stake up or get a leg up in anything, to get a stake in anything. And it's a mess. And it's only going to get worse. You're only going to see the wealth gap and that compound wealth coming from white Americans. The wealth gap will only spread wider and faster. And the compound wealth built by white Americans and generational wealth will continue to increase. It's only going to just get to that space where it's like, man, it's not even an equal playing field. Oh, I'm there with you, S. Carlton. Low-key really hates SCAD because they're pushing so much of that gentrification. That's Savannah School of the Arts. And like SCAD is a great institution as far as, what they offer. But again, like the cost in Savannah is skyrocketing. Like just because like SCAD, it has a whole, like a lot of like East Savannah, portions of West Savannah, like a lot of SCAD owns up everything over there, right? But I mean, you're seeing it everywhere where neighborhoods are going through the change, right? And especially a lot of times when colleges buy up areas, it kind of, Howard's doing the same thing in DC, in their ward. A lot of times when universities start to buy up land in areas, the value goes up. By the way, okay, I was supposed to tell y'all this. Remember it was in the news from years ago where it was the guy who kept walking the dog on Howard's campus and the students were getting pissed because the dog was pooping on the yard and everything. So anyway, they interviewed one guy who was one of the newer residents in the area. It's like this white guy. And he was saying this thing about, well, yeah, this is about community and something, something, something. And if you can't be a part of it, then just move the campus. Like he was just saying, if y'all got a problem with white people walking their dogs on Howard's campus and pooping on the yard, then just move the whole campus. Why did I walk past that man the other day? And like, I was walking, I was like, wait, I know him. Like, and I feel like he knew who I was. I feel like he saw my video because we both kind of gave one of them looks. I was like, I'm going to behave. That was very interesting. Mind you, that was like 2018, had to be, maybe 2019. I was like, I know that MFer. I still remember I still remember the clip. He's like, just move the campus. It was the same week that they also had that proper or the spot on Florida and Georgia that used to play the go-go music, and all the white people complained and they tried to turn the music off, and that started the whole Mochella adult mute go-go type thing. But anyway, crazy. DC is a small world. Like DC is not a big city, so you end up seeing a whole lot of folks all the time. Sean C. Muhammad said, yes, documents were destroyed. Yes. Mm-hmm. Kayla says, so what can be done with heirs land? It depends on the state. But for a lot of places, like I said, a lot of it is as is. The families have to kind of manage and work the land. Now, a lot of folks end up just selling it, honestly. A lot of people sell their land. Some petition the government to, get into a space where the government can recognize that the land is there. Some people go and get a lawyer and try to go through archives and litigation and try to find some kind of deed. Because a lot of this land too, some of it was passed down from, families, but some of it as well. There were some slave owners who were like, all right, you can get a little piece here and there, but stuff wasn't in writing. And so it's word of mouth. Sharecroppers sometimes finally paid off their debt and they finally might get a little piece of something, but it ain't in writing. Like there's all kind of stuff that's just unofficial, because just think about it. Like when you go back to a certain time period, we were not in a space where we thought you needed to have everything like perfectly documented and organized and put into these different systems, and everything was kind of just a free-for-all. It's kind of like even when you talk about our time zones. At one point, it used to be that almost every city in the United States had their own time zone, and the challenge was as we came into our railway system, we started having the train system. That was a challenge because it was extremely hard to try and arrange the schedules for trains and everything when it came to shipments and commuters and everything like that. And so over time, we started creating what you call those time zones globally. So everything always has, its own origin story or its own system. So a lot of people are losing that land, sadly, right? Go and now it's crazy because a lot of these malls that they built are all closing now, right? But go and look at some of these developments that were created, and go and, if you can, go look and see what the covenants are in the city, and see, what the rules were. Go see what was allowed and what wasn't allowed, right? You'll find and discover that there's a lot of crazy origins with a lot of things that we walk past every single day. Yeah, I'm not getting through all these topics tonight, and it is okay. Let me just make sure I got a lot of the. Dang, man, I gotta still talk about all that. Okay, man. Um, let's see. Veronica said I don't get the notifications. To be fair, I didn't even put this video in the system until maybe 30 minutes before I was about to go live. So sometimes it doesn't get to you guys. Sometimes the notification is delayed by a few hours, and then by the time y'all get it, I'm already done. Oh, okay, Dan, I get what you're saying. She says, I thought you were asking something totally different. You said, no, they don't count them because they have compromised us. And I've been said a lot of these people are sold out. It's always been that. They've compromised us and aligned their pockets, throw them under the bus, period. I'm sick of the BS capital. Listen, I've already been there with that. Like, a lot of these folks, I've always said, it's one of the reasons I have no interest in going into politics. But a lot of folks, I do personally believe there are some people who go into politics with the right ideas, but it's so easy to get bought out, sadly. And a lot of folks are bought out. A lot of folks are there to be a face of symbolism. They're never going to fight and change anything. You have, even in the CBC, you have some who will not budge. Even a conversation of reparations, they don't want to hear, right? Even when it comes to challenging some of the policies that have taken place within the Democrat Party, they're not budging because they're buddy with whoever, and they're not shifting. This is just gonna be the way it is. Y'all need that's nonsense. Some of these folks, like, I'm in a space, and I've said this a million times. I'm not a fan of any politician. I see you as somebody who you have made some kind of claim or some kind of promise where you want to apparently make my life easier. So if you get in office, cool. But I'm also like, you don't get to pass it. So I don't care if you can do the electric slide. I don't care if you know the latest rap songs and you got a playlist and you got the good makeup and the good hair and you got all the entertainers and Jay-Z is your friend. None of that does anything for me at the end of the day, because all that symbolism, that can be my own symbolism, right? So when it comes to politicians, like, nobody is exempt from smoke with me right now, not a single person. And so that's just the way I move. I think more people should kind of have that same approach, because a lot of people get in the office and they're comfortable. They know that people are going to keep voting for them anyway. They know that if they get in, it's smooth sailing. And I think a lot of times, because life just goes on, a lot of people are fine with nonsense because they're like, well, there's always tomorrow. Like, there's a lot of folks who move in that realm. So think of just how chaotic the last few years have been, especially when we talk about policy and things that we thought were once present and how they've all been seam ripped. People are outraged for 5 minutes and they move on to the next, right? It reminds me of even when RBG died, right? I remember seeing these people on Twitter. If Trump appoints another Supreme Court justice, we are going to riot. Man, Trump would put the next person right in there and ain't nothing happened, right? Nothing happened. Okay, it's the same way when folks be like, "Oh, we're gonna move to Canada. We're gonna move to so and so because we don't like whatever's happening. Ain't nobody be going nowhere. You still stay right here and put up with the nonsense, all right?" Billy Flood said, "Because our black 1% is Clarence Thomas and Condoleezza Rice." Right, and then also listen, you start to see it too, and a lot of people come into money. That conversation of collective goes out the window too, right? Not everybody, like, that's the other thing. In the same way, we can have the conversation that black people are not a monolith. Also understand, and I've always said this a billion times, yes, we're not a monolith, but we all live under the same system of anti-blackness. However, there are some in the collective who get into a space of their definition of prosperity, and they be like, peace, Me, myself, and I. The rest of y'all figure it out. Good for you. So, you know, you don't even know who your real allies are, which is why I don't do the symbolism. There's a lot of people that are put into places, um, you know, they have the face, they have the look, they have the lingo, they might even have the haircut. And then you see what policy they put in, you be like, what kind of nonsense is this? Right? All right. Okay, you said now that's why I say, Calvin, that until we take our trillions and come together as a collective and fund our own, we will never be taken seriously. But I hear that, but it's honestly not there. That trillion is honestly, it sounds like a lot, but honestly, it's not in this game at all. Um, I think mm, where do I want to go with this? Like I said, that trillion is one giant lump sum, but that does not include the conversation of people like paying their mortgage and their bills and whatever loans or whatever debt they have. Like a lot of that trillion would be getting eaten up by a lot of student loan debt, by the way, too, for a lot of Black students. Um, but again, even when you're talking, like a lot of when we do come into money, a lot of that ends up going into purchasing a home, right? So it gets swallowed up by home purchasing, or it might get swallowed up by you might need a car, or again, medical bills. You know, think about a lot of times there's a lot of people who go bankrupt because of medical expenses. So that trillion sounds like a lot, but you know, if you can get 30 of the world's richest people to get hang together, chop it up, and they can throw a trillion out like it's nothing. Like, oh, here you guys go. It's nothing, right? And again, I think what's happening is you're going against an entire system that is embedded. We collectively, even if we're moving as a collective, it almost would still come off as like an individual attempt. And what I mean by that is the money we have is not, I'm not going to say it's not long enough to do it solely by ourselves, but we would have to gain leverage with other groups of people in order to really shift a lot of things. But a lot of folks are locked into their anti-Blackness. We don't have allies. So that's a challenge we work against. I think as far as a candidate, um, it would go back to my conversation of a third party using leverage with the major two parties. I don't think we're going to see a Black anything for a long time. And when I say Black, I'm not talking about it's just their face. I mean, their politics align with the well-being of Black America. It can still be politics that align with the well-being of all American citizens and ensuring that the economy is stable and health and all the other stuff is good for everybody. But as far as ensuring that Black people are going to be okay, I don't know if we're ever going to see that in our lifetime again, because what we're getting now is a response to the Obama era. This is all white rage because Obama got up in there. And mind you, white people benefited under Obama. Obama was able to do a few things here and there for us, but you know, a lot of his presidency, in my opinion, ended up being symbolic. And a lot of his role at the time when he got in was to stabilize the country after the economic collapse. And so, even with that being said, right, white America was pissed that he got in there. Pissed that there's a Black woman in the White House. Pissed that there's the black first lady's mama is in the White House. Pissed that the dogs were Black. Pissed that the first children were Black. Pissed about all of it, right? Pissed that, you know, he was in a space that they thought no, he should have never just had access to, right? And so you're up against that. And again, kind of, I guess the way I would look at it is the same way I talk about Black mom and pop businesses, right? And the challenge they run into with trying to transition into industry corporation. Like there are going to be a few that make it, of course, yes, but many, you know, no matter how hard they work, how great their product is, without some support from like a venture capitalist company, a lot of times they're not going to make that transition into that next realm. And what sucks for them, unfortunately, and God bless them, is they didn't get the benefits and the luxuries that a lot of white corporations and white businesses got. They didn't get the handouts from the federal government. You know what I mean? And so you just see it's so layered. So I think the idea of us putting our money together to get behind something is one piece of it, but I don't think it solves the bigger picture. I think it's one piece of the pie. It's like it's a stepping stone, but there's so much more. I think this is me. You don't have to agree. I just think there's so much more that also has to be included in that conversation. And we also have to be careful that we don't burn the little bit of wealth we do have behind the wrong candidate and then it goes wrong. Because again, this can go back to the Clarence Thomas conversation, right? Thurgood Marshall retires, you know, Bush is like, oh, I'm gonna be real slick. Y'all want some representation? Yeah, I'm gonna put somebody black up in here. Here you go. Right? Here's Clarence Thomas, who 100% is the polar opposite, right? But people jumped into the symbolism conversation and thought, oh, this would be great. Yeah, this is one of us. And then you get Anita Hill, and she's like, this he is not good. He was putting pubic hairs on my soda can and long dong silver and all this other crazy stuff. And this is, all kind of hearings. And then it turned into, oh, this is an attempt to tear down a black man. Y'all trying to stop this black man who worked so hard to be great. And mind you, understand, Clarence Thomas put in the work. Now, he does benefit from affirmative action because the year that he went to it's in that podcast I referenced. I can't remember if it's his undergraduate institution or when he went to grad school or law school, but he is a part of the cohort that would have been that first cohort of affirmative action, even though he claims it's not his experience. But anyway, you put Clarence up in there, right? He's on the Supreme Court, folks, electric slide and celebrating. That Negro has gone, he has gone and seam ripped everything. So I don't know. It's layered conversation. We are fighting a 400-year battle and trying to solve it in 20 years. Somebody said Calvin should have snuck him. Yeah, that's the guy I ran into. The name of that documentary is called. This is to who was asking. This was to Chrissy-ish. The name of the documentary is called Gaining Ground: The Fight for Black Land. He said, move to campus. The campus been there since the 1860s. Move to campus. 1867. Y'all just moved the whole campus. Kind of nonsense. And mind you, there was a dog park down the street from where he lived. And like I said before in that video, Howard's campus is not a shortcut to anything. It's not like you cut through Howard's campus to get anywhere. Like if you're going to Howard's campus, you're going to Howard's campus. So to go to Howard's campus and put your dog on the yard to go and poop, you are intentionally doing that. So don't sit here and act like, oh, it was just a shortcut. Cut the crap. Somebody said, where do we even go not to deal with this? Ain't nowhere to go. That's the challenge. That's why I be asking, like, y'all sure there's not a Wakanda that exists for real for black folks? Like, if y'all know something, let me know. Like, you got to sit here and write this nonsense out, right? Okay. I'm going to just change the title of this video. That's what I'll just do because I didn't get to all these topics. Yeah, they should have listened to Anita. And I mean, they really pushed and ran with this. And to be fair to that, this is also before social media as well. So a lot of folks weren't, and the reason I say social media, and even as far as the internet, it was still around, but it's a different kind of access. So a lot of folks would tend to often, look to our leaders, look to our media as the source of information. And so a lot of people were kind of bamboozled into jumping behind that. They were like, oh, yeah, they doing all this stuff to tear down this man. That's one of the things that has shifted in modern times. Like we have more access to information. So I do give some extent of grace. Some of that is also like, you just got to do your own research. But like, yeah, they ran with that and did the whole gender war within the black collective, and y'all trying to stop the black man from being great. And Clarence went in there and said, I'm gonna show y'all. And then he went ahead and married Jeannie, whatever her name is. And here we are. Somebody said, cut the crap, cut the check. Okay. Oh, I was supposed to talk about Madonna. This doesn't even fly on my video, but I'll give Madonna 2 minutes. So it was reported that she had been like found unresponsive. Apparently she had a bacterial infection, and so she has postponed the whole tour. Best wishes to her. And I guess the weird thing is a lot of these entertainers, I think, really overwork themselves. And I really don't feel like talking about this because I've just been on this, but I already put it in the title, so we'll talk about her for a quick minute. I'll just say take your health seriously, because you've just seen so many like seasoned entertainers. We've seen them leave us, right? Fortunately, she is apparently going to be fine. She's postponed the tour. They haven't really released a whole lot of information, so I'm not really sure what's going on with that, but good luck to her. Same thing with Jamie Foxx. They haven't really said a lot with Jamie either. We're still kind of trying to figure out what happened with him. But, best wishes to these celebrities. I just hope that people take better care of themselves. And the bacterial infection, things happen, but they can definitely take people down. I do want to shift Um, okay, I'm going to talk about Calishia Hood for a quick minute. I wanted to talk about it a bit more expansively, but it is midnight and we've been on here for almost 3 hours now. I'm going to say this. Now, this is the story where you had the man that punched the woman in the face and then the son came and shot the man and everything. I'm going to say this. For me, one part that was disappointing, if as far as the first, nobody stepped in to de-escalate that, and they let that man well on that woman. I don't care what the argument was about or what who said what or who felt disrespected. To stand there and watch a black woman get pounded on by another black man, and you stand there and do nothing. Something about that doesn't sit right with me, right? And the challenge, especially when it comes to the son, right? Some people are feeling some kind of way. They're like, no, she shouldn't have called him and brought him into that situation, so on and so forth. I will speak for myself. If that was my mama, y'all know I love my mama. Like, I might have done the same thing if I was 14 or 15. And I felt like I wouldn't be able to protect my mom in the way that I thought I could. And I'm watching a grown man wail on my mom and punch her with all of his might. Like, I might have done the same thing. Is that a good thing? I don't necessarily think so. But I think people get put into situations where there are hard choices that are made, right? And what I find so interesting is we'll have these random conversations about stand your ground, and it seems to be beneficial for one demographic. But then when black folks are in that same predicament, then it's an all-out war. Now, remember, what ended up happening is they got charged. The charges have recently been dropped. I think people had started to GoFundMe, but I think the funds from that have been snatched back. The entire situation as a whole is sad. And I think sometimes, even when it comes to ego, sometimes you got to let stuff go, right? To the man that was killed, it's like, was the situation deep enough where you needed to put hands on this woman because y'all had an argument? Like, I'm like this. Like, on the live, I'll be up here hype, talking trash all day. But in life, everybody, if you know me, I'm here. Nothing ever gets me out of this because it's just like, life is too short. You don't know how crazy people are. I do drive with a hammer and a blade in the car just in case somebody wants to pop off and something has to happen. But I've always told people, don't call me to come square up with somebody because you got drama. I'm the fun friend. You call me for the laugh. You call me for karaoke. You call me for game night. If it's a fight outside, don't call me. I'm not coming out there. Like, I just don't bring me into the nonsense. But I think in that situation, like I said, for me, that what was frustrating was everybody in that takeout place or that store and nobody intervening, nobody getting homeboy down to a space like, hey, bro, it's not this deep, calm down, and just understand, you just never know where people's headspace is, right? This is why I don't really bother people. Like, I mind my business. When I tell you I mind my business, I mind my business. It's not saying I'm afraid of people or anything like that. I just don't have the energy and time to deal with somebody else's state of mind when I don't know where they're at. Like, that's where I'm at. And so, for the son, I think, please get him some therapy ASAP. That's a lot. I think for that family, they're going to have to probably relocate. Because again, there's also a conversation of retaliation, right? I've told you that I've been very transparent about like my paternal side, and 2014, I don't remember what video you talked about it on, but I definitely had 4 relatives die in the same 2-week period because it was a back and forth situation. This is out of Richmond, California. And so seeing and witnessing that, where it started where there was some kind of mishap, somebody gets killed, then I have a cousin get shot and killed at their own birthday party. And then it goes back and forth. Somebody else gets killed. And then one of my cousins gets killed. Then another person gets killed. Then another cousin gets killed. Then somebody else gets killed. And then my 4th cousin gets killed. And so understand, like, for some people, we are all torn from a different cloth. We have different experiences. But I think for that family, I don't think, as far as for the boy and the mom, I don't think they would be in a space where they're going to have a life that's normal, still living where they live. They're going to have to relocate. But the entire thing for me is sad. And I hate that, again, with everything we have going on in the world, we let petty stuff take us out of our element and end up in a space where now we're detrimental to ourselves and our collectives. It's just not good. So yeah, prayers to everybody affected by that. But like, I don't know. It was really disturbing. Something like, Yeah, I mm, that video was very disturbing to watch, right? Um, and it to me it makes me question how folks move. Like, how did it even get to that? We'll talk about that on another conversation. Let me read some comments. Um, I just think, yeah, these folks we be losing folks to so many like things that are unnecessary. But again, like I said, if I was in that situation and that was my mom, like, what? No, right? Like, absolutely not. Like, man. And I'm glad that at least for that young man, he gets a second chance because I think most kids in that predicament would do whatever they need to do to protect their mom. Like, we love our mamas, right? Like, our mamas are everything to us. So, man, um, yeah, nobody's putting hands on my mama at all. Christine said he punched her 3 times unprovoked. She was not even talking to him. He inserted his dusty A in her business. Her order was wrong and she wanted it fixed. Like, and you jump in it and be like, why are you wailing on this woman? I don't like people that like wail on folks that they know they're stronger than or do the most. There's no reason to ever go to level 10 on somebody when it's unwarranted. Like, that kind of stuff pisses me off. Um, Billy Flood, the fact people could record her, but no one helped her. It's the same thing with the guy in the subway. Y'all sitting here recording the man holding the man in a chokehold or whatever for 15 minutes, and I'm like, y'all don't like that. Now that's when I stop minding my business. Okay, that's when I'm like, wait a minute, time out. We ain't. I'm not about to stand here and let somebody die on the train with me. Like, I think again, social media has been the best and worst thing to happen to humanity. It sometimes can be a resource, and sometimes it works against us. People just think everything is a mess. Like. Um, like I remember folks tried to chew me up on here one time. Actually, no, I'm not even telling that story. Yeah, yeah, messing up my energy. Never mind. I'll talk about it later. Um, okay. Um, oh yeah, Airbnb. I'm enjoying watching Airbnb suffer. Now, remember we did a few videos talking about some of the racial discrimination that exists within the Airbnb system and the nonsense that's there. So I've enjoyed reading how they are currently struggling at the moment because they also play a huge role into why our housing is extremely ridiculous right now as far as pricing and how everything is so high, mainly because again, you have people and corporations buying up all kind of property all around the country and purposely using it specifically for only Airbnb. And what it has done is helped to skyrocket the price and cost of housing all across the country. So I was looking at some of the numbers with Airbnb's revenue collapse, and who knows, maybe this will swing back the other way. But right now, um, where is this? Sevierville, Tennessee, revenues dropped by 47%. Phoenix, Arizona, revenue dropped by 47%. Austin, Texas, revenue dropped by 46%. And understand, like a place like Austin is extremely expensive these days. Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, revenue dropped 45%. San Antonio, Texas, revenue dropped 43.8%. Salisbury, Maryland, revenue dropped 39.3%. Denver, revenue dropped 38.6%. New Orleans, revenue dropped 37%. Seattle, revenue dropped 35.2%. Orlando, revenue dropped 34.8%. But what's happening is, so long story short, Airbnb is starting to lose a whole bunch of revenue. For me, just going back to the discriminatory practices that I've seen with Airbnb, I got my popcorn. And I think again, it plays a role into what's happening with our housing crisis. And so Airbnb, I think initially I thought was a great idea until corporations took it over, until companies that had money bought all this property and then started using property specifically for Airbnb, right? It kind of prices people out of their own neighborhoods. It brings up the taxes. It does all kind of different things. And then some Airbnb owners just be doing too much anyway, right? We will see how that kind of operates. But um, yeah, I think those are all of the main topics I wanted to cover. I'm going to come back to that story on a different video just because it's already getting late. All right, we'll chop it up for a few minutes and then I will call it a night. I should have put that Madonna story before I did all these heavy ones because it felt awkward talking about celebrity culture after we just covered some heavy stuff. Oh, as far as Johnathan Majors, we'll see how everything unfolds. This is one of the reasons why I did not harp on him right away when I saw the story because I was like, Let me see what else is going to come out with these facts. And so we will see how this all aligns. But yeah, if in the event that he was set up and lost everything, he's going to have some great lawsuits on his hands if that's the case. Because they got him out of there quick. He lost everything overnight. We will see what happens with that as more facts come out and what happens with litigation. All right. All right. Shanti said, right. Sad her child had to step up in that moment. Now her son caught a body at 14, 15. I just think that's so traumatizing to. I don't think your life is ever the same. I think, yeah, that's why I was like, he's going to need some therapy and everything else like that. Like some people I think have seen too much, especially after working with kids. And like the one thing with the podcast, most of the stories I put in there are all the happy ones. There are some really dark and sad ones too. But like after seeing what some of them kids I work with dealt with, I'm like, dang, I hope they get some of the help they're gonna need later down the line. Like some folks deal with so much and some are exposed to so many things that they should not have to even consider or fathom being a part of their reality. And it becomes that. And I think that is the discouraging part about just life in general. Everybody's given a different deck of cards, and sometimes some cards are just not great cards, and you still have to play this game that we're all dropped into. I don't know anything about the girlfriend. So I didn't. Somebody saying the girlfriend posting how she was ride or die and he didn't deserve it. Girl, something. He was. I don't know the full story with the girlfriend and all. As far as the man that was killed, but man. Somebody said in Caribbean, stay with a machete close by. My mom's fiance, he has one at his house. He ain't crazy though, but he definitely keeps a machete. But yes, I heard she's suing the city as well. Y'all said somebody put her address out. Yes, she gonna have to move. Um, yeah, Jonathan Majors, I'll revisit once I have more details. I just don't like speaking on stuff when I don't know what I'm talking about. But yeah, we shall see what's going on. YouTube Academia said, "Is this a marathon?" No, we about to wrap this up in a minute. I'm about to go to bed. I hate that this whole video was so like heavy. We didn't get to have no fun topics tonight, but that's okay. Um, and Airbnb got expensive. Course correction said, "Let Airbnb implode. They're as expensive as hotels. They've taken so many rentals off the market. Like it got super high out of nowhere. I'm like, dang, some of the Airbnb. Oh, like even when I was doing pullover so I can hit you, I was so pissed because I did an Airbnb for that, mainly because I was trying to get a spot close to where we were going to be filming. And literally 2 days, now mind you, I booked my Airbnb like a month before I flew out to LA. And then 2 days before they going to cancel it. I'm like, I mean, at least Airbnb gave me, a percentage back of everything and helped me to get a new place. But I'm like, y'all tried it. Calvin, did you hear Billboard would stop counting digital sales sold from artists' web stories toward the Hot 100 starting tomorrow? This is going to affect certifications and money artists make. The charts are already chaos anyway. You're not making no money. Like I don't know. Billboard is going to keep changing the rules every week because they have to keep adjusting to whatever happens in the industry. Like Billboard to me is always 3 steps behind every time. They've been behind since Napster. So they're always playing catch up to everything. Yeah, let me make sure I change the title of this video because I don't know if I covered everything in it. Somebody said Airbnbs can be dangerous. I've heard horror stories. Even another YouTuber I watched went on vacation once and they got robbed. And the other thing, I do feel bad for people who honestly are good people and just, they rent a room out or do whatever they do. And they actually were using it to help, fund, and help pay their bills. That part I have nothing against. I'm totally for people doing what they have to do. But again, corporations came. Same with our housing market. Like corporations came and bought up everything. Like think about a lot of the homes that are currently on the market are owned by corporations, not by homeowners or anything like that. And so they have a monopoly on housing right now. That's why the cost is so freaking high, which I think sucks. Um, Somebody said, but Ezra Miller, yeah, they let Ezra Miller just do whatever he wanted to do. They're like crazy, right? Um, he should definitely be getting the same smoke for his nonsense. And in mind, he kept doing stuff. And it's interesting how you see the goalposts get moved depending on who it is. Now, I will say with the Johnathan Majors bit, there are like every time something like this happens, there's additional stories that come out that haven't been vetted and people run with it. So I think I saw a story where they're like, "Oh yeah, the girl got arrested." I was like, "No, that didn't happen. Let's let's not start jumping and putting stuff out there that's not true, because then it's going to lead to a bigger issue." Um, Let us see. Okay, I think I'm at the bottom of my live finally. Somebody said, "Rolling Stone just released an expose on Jonathan Majors." Okay, we shall see what that's about. Um, yeah. All right, I will hang on for about 3 more minutes and then we are off of this because I need to go to bed. But like I said, there will be a new podcast episode out. Uh, my goal is to have it out Sunday night. If it doesn't come out Sunday night, it might end up being Monday, but it's most likely going to be Sunday night. And then the book club, again, like I said, will be Monday night as well. Um, I'm anxious to see, again, with this whole affirmative action thing, I'm anxious to see just how all this is going to play out over time, how this is going to affect college admissions, how it's going to affect scholarships, how it's going to affect a lot of different things. I don't think that battle is over, but I do think for the moment it is temporarily cemented, and which kind of sucks. So we shall see. Um, Poison Ivy said it's okay. The BT Awards live was fun. That's true. We had a good time on that, so that was fun. Yeah, so I guess that balances it out. Plus, look, y'all got 2 lives in like 4 days or 5 days. Um, I did not get a chance to watch The Idol, but I heard it was canceled already. Thank you, Alicia B. Rilla said Billboard really can't be used in legacy talks anymore in terms of popularity, not quality. I think I've said this a million times. There needs to be a delineation between the different eras in music in regards to when they start talking about these records and stuff that are broken. Like, what's interesting is as the industry continues to evolve and shift and go from like digital to streaming to whatever might come after streaming in the future, you see all these records get broken easier and easier and easier. So, like, you know, even when they talk about, oh, like a lot of modern artists, they're like, oh, this artist has the most placements on the Billboard Hot 100 in general. And I'm like, but it's easy to get on the Billboard Hot 100 now, because as long as you have enough streams or enough digital sales, you're on the Hot 100 automatically. Up until 1998, if you didn't have a physical single released in stores and the single also was not sent to radio, you could not chart on the Hot 100. You know what I mean? And so, now we're in a space where, you don't have to have all of these same stipulations. And so it's a lot easier for a lot of people to chart. Um, and there used to be a rule against songs that were not singles charting. And so this is why sometimes record labels back in the day in the 90s, sometimes they would throw out a promo single, but it may not, or a radio promo single, but it may not have had a music video or anything like that. And that was because, and this is really before you started having those nationally syndicated playlists, but a lot of times an album would come out, the radio DJs are going to play and spin the singles that were sent by the label, but sometimes they're like, oh, we like this song, and they start playing it and start playing it, and it starts to gain traction. Then the label is like, oh, okay, actually this song is kind of doing good in these different markets. We're not going to jump 100% behind it because, we're pushing a different single, but here's a radio promo single. Now, we're eligible for like airplay charts and everything else like that. So you saw that happen a lot of times, right? So that was the way that it worked. But today, if let's just say I released an album right now and it just happened to hit, and every song on it hit. And y'all know I normally have long albums, right? And all 20 tracks, were in the top 20 on iTunes and had good streams. That means the next week I'm going to be on the Billboard Hot 100, as opposed to years ago. The only song that would have been on the Hot 100 out of those 20 tracks would have been whatever I released as an actual single. And that would have had to mean that it additionally also probably needed to have really good radio support in order to chart high. So the rules just keep changing. So I think there should be pretty much a delineation. So highlight the accomplishments of what took place during the physical era, meaning everything from when people had to just still go and buy things in the store, specifically physical, vinyls, CDs, cassettes, 8 tracks, 33s, 45s, all of that's the physical era. Then you can have another window or another category for the combination of the digital and the physical era, right? That's the physical era. Plus, when we start getting into iTunes and Amazon Music and, these places where you can purchase and buy songs digitally, like when albums were like $9, $10 on iTunes and stuff like that, that's an era that you can lock in. Then you can lock in the physical, a digital, and an early streaming era. That would probably be about 2011 to about 2014, right? Where you have the physical era where people are still buying things physically in the stores, the digital where they're purchasing on iTunes, and what's happening with streaming. Because streaming is still, at this point, it's still kind of on the up and go. It's still on the climb. That could be a window, right? Then you should also have a specific category that only highlights what happens in the digital and streaming era and does not include the physical, right? And talk about the accolades that come from that. I think there should be specifically just a digital era that's highlighted, and I think there should be specifically a streaming era that's highlighted. And that way, when you start talking about accolades and accomplishments on the Billboard Hot 100, it doesn't erase the legacies of people from the physical era, because the physical era was a lot more challenging in regards to getting hits. That's why somebody like a Stevie Wonder only has 10 number one hits. I mean, actually, that's not bad at all. Or like a Stevie or a Janet have 10 number one hits, but then, you can get to, let's go and look at the numbers here. You can get to a lot of these newer artists who have racked up, number one, like multiple number one hits in a handful of years, and most likely will surpass and break a lot of these records. Like Drake is gonna probably start breaking some of these records. Taylor Swift will continue to break records. If Rihanna decides to come back into music, I'm sure she can get a handful of additional number one hits. Like the rules have kind of changed and shifted to where, up until '05, especially when radio still played a huge role in the rules and everything, it was very, very challenging to get a number one hit and then a sustainable one at that. And look how much easier it is now, where you're getting a lot of songs that are number one for extended periods of time. That still was happening in the past, but it was, the cards had to really align then. Today, it's just a little bit easier. And it's not to take away from the experience of the current artist, but it just goes to show, I think you have to kind of just highlight that, yeah, these things are different in the different eras. Okay. It would be like, I think I said this a few lives ago, comparing what they did in gymnastics in the 1950s versus what they do in 2023. Very different eras. So, make everything fit within its respective realm of reality. Okay, we're almost off this for real. Somebody said, what's my gym routine? Well, I pump my chest up. No, I was kidding. No, what do I do? I don't do like some people do like, oh, it's leg day, it's arm day. I just do the full body workout when I go. So I normally go 4 to 5 times a week, which is a little too much sometimes. And you work your core, I work my arms, then I work the hips and the legs, then I go back to the arms and the chest, then I do the core again, then I go back to the arms and the chest one more time. And if I have any energy left, then I go to the legs. So I pretty much just utilize the different machines that are there, for all the different things that are accessible. And then the diet I'm trying to shift. I'm trying to cut sugar a bit more. And the only reason I started doing all that, I didn't like how my core started to look. Like once COVID hit, I realized I was sitting around too much. So I was like, I don't like how that looks. We got to fix that. So I got that to where I wanted to go, but I just feel really good after working out. So I don't know. I just feel really good afterwards. So that's why I like to do it. At first I used to hate it, but now it's like, okay, I start feeling like I'm going through withdrawal if I don't go after more than 3 days. Um, Somebody said Zillion is trying to sell what they bought during the pandemic. Oh, a lot of folks who did those big bulk purchases in regards to property and stuff, because they, in regards to like the Airbnbs and all that, yeah, folks are going to struggle to kind of sell off some of this stuff. Some of these people are going to sell this stuff at a loss. Y'all really be hanging with us. It'd be late. We'd be late on here. Y'all be hanging out. Somebody said, let me go stream the hardcover. I will be glad when I can finally promote something else. I've been milking the hardcover for like 4 years, but I love that. That album is my baby. Um, Jojo said, just got here. Did I miss much, y'all? Yeah, right now my clock is saying 3 hours and 3 minutes and 55 seconds. So we've been up here talking, but don't worry, the replay will be here for you. Calvin, do I think we're in a housing recession? I don't know what we're in. The economy is weird to me. Like when they start bragging about how great it is and everything and, job growth and all of that is great. But the wages be a little, even wages are finally going up. So, but the wages, I just think because of inflation and how expensive everything is, I don't even think we get to really enjoy the benefits of the greatness that is there. And the world economy is very unstable right now. I think with housing, I think there's about to be a big burst later down the line within like the next year or 2 years. I definitely see that coming. I just think the economy tends to reset itself when one element of it gets a little too extreme. And I think the housing market is about to correct itself. I think the stock market is still technically fine for now. But like I said, for people who do have money in the stock market, I always think it's good to have your money in both the bond market and the stock market, and then in different kinds of shares and stuff like that. So like high yield, low yield, like just don't put all your money in one place. That's all I'll say. Don't put it all in one place. Like mine is spread out everywhere. So even when the economy crashes, okay, well the stuff that's in the bond market, fine, that gets to rise, and then when it goes the other way around and the economy's doing good, then my stuff that's in the bond starts to go down a little bit. Yeah, I kind of just mix it up a little bit. But yeah, I can just say, like, I just look at how much I pay in rent. I'd be ready to punch somebody in the back of the face. Like, dang, man, I'm making good money and don't even get to enjoy it. But that's okay. Landlord just sent my lease renewal rent increases. That's just a given. Yeah, my renewal is in November, and I know it's gonna go up even more. All right. Oh, dang! I did not talk about that. Adner Nomra, was the Titan submersible discussed? All I will say is this. One, I do feel sad for the son who got dragged into that nonsense and had to be collateral. I was telling this to somebody the other day. It seems like there's a lot of really, really wealthy people who just honestly feel that they are invincible from reality sometimes. And they continue to just kind of do whatever they want to do, even when it means that it's going to come at the detriment of themselves or other people. So I was reading like the backstory with the CEO and all this. Like, long story short, at this point, everybody's talked about it, but like, this is the little sub thing they tried to build to go and revisit the wreckage of the Titanic. And, now we've learned that, before they even got to it, it imploded. And once they had hit a certain threshold, like I was over here digging through the YouTube rabbit hole, trying to understand how this water pressure and stuff works and everything. But yeah, I was reading the emails, right? Let me see. This is from 2018. And so, because understand, like, they've been trying to do this forever and build and everything. And there were ex-employees who talked about how they brought up to the CEO, like, hey, man, this is not a good idea. This is dangerous. And folks were fired, right? Anyway, this is coming from March 22nd, 2018. This is from Rob to Stockton Rush. You are wanting to use a prototype unclassified technology in a very hostile place. As much as I appreciate entrepreneurship and innovation, you are potentially putting an entire industry at risk. His response: I know that our engineering focused innovative approach as opposed to an existing standard compliance focused design process flies in the face of the submersible orthodoxy, but that is the nature of innovation. I have grown tired of industry players who try to use a safety argument to stop innovation and new entrants from entering their small existing market. Um, since Guillermo and I started Ocean Gate, we have heard the baseless cries of "you're gonna kill someone" way too often. I take this, I take this as a serious personal insult. In response, I think you are potentially placing yourself and your clients in a dangerous dynamic. Ironically, in your race to the Titanic, you are mirroring the famous catch cry, "she is unsinkable." Having dived the Titanic and having stood in a coroner's court as a technical expert, it would be remiss of me not to bring this to your attention. So, even with that, like thinking about the fact that somebody's telling you, like, sir, you are trying to do something that, at this point more people have been, to the moon than the Titanic, as far as or to the space than the Titanic, as far as trying to go in some kind of gadget to get down there, right? And they're saying, like, listen, this stuff is, your technology is not really quite aligning. I was looking at what they use, some of the material wasn't top grade and everything else like that. They're using a little game controller to do whatever they do, but it's like there's a lot of people who are extremely wealthy who feel that they can just out talk reality. They feel like they can just outthink reality. It's kind of like, even when I look at Elon Musk, right? Elon swears that he's friends with these people on Twitter. Like, he's somebody who moves as if all will be well. So, he'll do whatever is detrimental to Twitter or whatever, and so be it. He knows what he's talking about. He's the greatest thinker. Even when he came in there, he walked in there with the big sink, let that sink in. Everything is a joke to some of these people because they just feel invincible. Even when you think about McFarlane, the guy that was going to do Fire Festival, and how all of the cards are not aligned. Not a single one is aligned, right? The dominoes are not falling into place, and he's just moving like everything's good. The flights get in, the buses get in, people don't have places to stay, and what does he do? He gets on the jet ski, right? He gets on the jet ski. Just everything's cool. We're gonna be fine. It is what it is, right? And so you keep watching all these really, really wealthy people just be so far removed from reality. That includes your former president as well. Also includes a lot of our politicians, right? And so I just found that part interesting, that we're now in a space where people think they can out talk science. They think they can out talk reality. We kind of even saw that in response to the pandemic, and how some people responded to it and reality. Like, folks feel invincible and feel like you can just ignore things and they go away and you can just tune people out. So the fact that he would respond saying, well, highlighting how innovative his product is and how it's insulting, and he's heard the countless cries, but it's a personal insult. It ain't about you. We're talking reality. And now you done brought some additional people in this, and now what is it? 5 people that are dead, right? And then the worst part of it, now we got to, they got to spend millions of dollars to go and get you. And then again, some people were bringing up the conversation of even like the fact that you had a migrant boat sink with hundreds of people who died. And when you look at the contrast of the experience, right? On one end, you have people who are destitute and just trying to find an opportunity for a better livelihood at any expense. They have tried and exhausted every option, and now they're like, you know what? Let's all stuff on a boat and hope we can get to the next place that will possibly give us a better opportunity at life, right? And all of them sink and die, sadly, and there's no sense of urgency. Then we get some rich folks who go and do some rich people stuff, and and know the dangers and don't care, and mind you, have charged people $250,000 to go to this mess, and then sadly they pass on and are killed instantly. And it's interesting just to see the response, right? So this submersible thing has been on the news for like a week and a half, major headline. Nobody talked about the boat with the people that died. And a lot of folks will say, oh, well, they should have been trying to legally cross into whatever border. And it's like, and at the same time, nobody should have got and made a metal tin can to get in and then try to go 12,000 feet under the ocean. Because understand, like, when you're talking about that pressure, like, there's a reason why, like, when you have those submarines and everything, when they go, well, there's certain levels they just don't go below, right? But they, they descent down and they have the repressurized cabin and everything. And even when they're done doing whatever they do at the bottom, they just can't shoot back up to the top. They have to slowly emerge back up to ensure that, that shift in pressure doesn't kill them. I just think, again, somebody whose ego is so inflated that he thinks he knows more than, everybody who's telling him what he's doing wrong. And so he just fires everybody. And it's like, dang, now here we are. I feel bad for the wife, because you lose your husband and your son. That's crazy. But that sucks. I mean, you ain't got to worry about me getting in nothing like that, okay? Like, I'm good on that. I don't even like getting in a whole lot of stuff, but yeah, that's crazy. And then, some of the people who were looking and talking about the waivers and how it kept saying death, 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 death. I'm not signing up for nothing. No, I can't. I can't. That's crazy. And I don't get the obsession with the Titanic. Like, what is the obsession with wanting to go and see a place where, thousands of people lost their lives, right? I guess. All right, this is my last bit because I said that like 20 minutes ago. Yeah, I just think that sucks. I mean, I guess the only somewhat decent part is they would have been killed instantly, so they wouldn't have even known about anything. That's the only thing I could think of. Because at first, remember, everybody thought they were just lost at sea. They were just down there floating somewhere, and eventually we would find them. And then you find out, oh no, they were done. Um, I don't know. Somebody said, "What do I think about the Little Mermaid underperforming?" It only underperformed in the racist countries that don't want to see a black person in the face as the face of anything. I still think it did fairly well, but I think they definitely thought it was going to be a bit bigger. I think where they will make up for it will be in streaming and merch and DVD. Not DVDs, nobody buys those anymore, but they'll definitely make up for it in like streaming and when they have a release. But I think it sucks that people again, because we definitely did two videos on Little Mermaid. It's just like you know a movie that's for the kids, adults decided to politicize and make all about them and their egos. And then these conversations, oh, well, this is erasing the experience of people who have red hair. And I'm like, again, y'all have censored yourselves and everything. Because now all of a sudden there are black people who don't have red hair. Like y'all just love to censor yourselves in everything, right? So I think that kind of sucks. But I think if anything, Holly's career is about to boom because that movie highlights and showcases just how talented she was and how she did a phenomenal job. And listen, the movie was a blockbuster in the Philippines. They get it. Philippines understand. So good for them. As far as those other countries that were being a bunch of haters, it's always been like that. You look at a lot of movies, especially movies with black leads, a lot of times they have to change the artwork and the cover and not even put us on it. Like, look at Black Panther. The Black Panther that was sent to Asia doesn't have Chadwick's face on it. They just have the actual, with the mask. Because again, folks will emulate us. They will borrow from our culture, but they can't stand when we be in the mix. Whatever. Yeah, the idea with them having the logic controller to move it, like that's when I would have climbed down. I'm not gonna lie. I would have been climbing in there, and as soon as I would have saw, what's that? Oh, this is our steering wheel. Oh, you know what? Hold on. Twist, let me come on back. I'm gonna see y'all later. How do I get my refund? Because I'm not going down in anything. And mind you, they only had like apparently they had a screen or something in there that was like the screen that would show what you can see outside. And they also had like a small window, but it's like they were in there cramped. They only have one seat, which is where the toilet is, and they were encouraged to go ahead and like wash their diet the day before, use the bathroom and everything beforehand. And I'm just like that. They weren't even in luxury. They were in there stuffed up in there. Like what? Mm-mm. I'm sorry. Um, I kind of almost feel the same way too with these billionaires that keep wanting to go to the moon and stuff. Like when they be talking about, oh, the SpaceX this, y'all can get on that if y'all want to. You ain't got to worry about me signing up for that one. Plus, I don't want to go to the moon anyway. I can see it from my house. Ain't nothing up there. It's cold. It's just some rocks and some dirt. It's cool, yeah, but do I want to go to it? Nah. Do I want to run the risk of going into all these different atmospheres and possibly the rocket gets sucked out of something or gets lost and gets hit and the engine goes out and it's just going to the east and keeps going to the east and goes past everything and can't stop and then you just get lost in space forever because for some reason they can't remote back in and turn the engine on to bring you back. I'm not trying to even experience or risk any of that. Or I don't know, you try to land on the moon and the thing crash lands and the ship is damaged. Now there's no way to get back, right? And they don't have a backup. It's going to take 18 months for them to send another one to come rescue. I'm good on that. Space is cool. I don't want to go to it though. But for all the folks that keep wanting to go to Mars and stuff, y'all go right ahead, set up a colony over there, have a good time. I'm gonna stay right on this earth. All right, my feet stay planted to the ground. Man. You might have said alternative science facts. Say Calvin, the current president is far removed. I'm just hoping he stay alive at this point. I'm not trying to be ageist or nothing, but at this point, since you just insist on running for re-election and everything, then I'm gonna need you to be fully alert in there and let us go ahead and ride through whatever's next. But that's another conversation. I think there's a comment I was trying to read and it just scrolled. Tanya said, looking at the depths is so it definitely not. I don't know what they're saying, but yeah, the fact you're going 12,500 feet underground or in the water, that's too deep for me. I'd be nervous in the pool once I go to the 6 feet. I'm like, all right, that's deep enough. let me come on back. Like, man. Mm, mm, mm. Yeah, that's crazy. Your ego got you killed, but the worst part is that you got other people killed with that nonsense. And I just, mm, they already ain't here no more, so I'm gonna leave it alone. But I wouldn't have signed up. That's all I'm saying. You ain't got to worry about me signing up for that. Somebody said, "What video did I talk about the Little Mermaid in?" I did 2 videos. I think both of them say, "Oh, y'all mad." It's before the movie came out. I just talked about America's and people's response to it because folks is doing the most. Oh, now listen, the orcas I ain't got no beef with. The orcas at this point have remembered all the times that humans have gone and kidnapped their children and offspring and put them into SeaWorld and zoos and everything else. And now the orcas said they got smoke for these people on these boats. So Mother Nature's doing its Mother Nature thing. It's the same way. Anytime I see a story of like the trophy hunters getting killed by the lion and stumped out by the elephants, I don't even be feeling bad. I'm like, should have left them alone. Like, I just think trophy hunting is stupid. You're not big and bad because you can shoot an animal, right? If you want to be like, if you want a trophy hunt, I feel like you have to go out in the wilderness with your bare hands and fist fight with the lion. And if you make it, you are a trophy hunter. If you don't, lesson learned. But no, they be out here shooting unsuspecting animals that are minding their business and they want to brag about it, take a picture. Like, I think that's stupid. So yeah, when I keep seeing these stories about trophy hunters getting killed by the animals, I said, good, that's what you get. Leave the animals alone. They don't be bothering us. We have ruined their entire planet, and then now they got to get shot at for existing. Like, you get on a plane and fly all the way to Tanzania to go shoot an elephant. Why? Calvin, do you think the US dollar is going to be replaced by a world currency? I do think the US dollar will eventually fall to, uh, might be China, will fall to another currency if the United States continues to divest from its people because it wants to center itself on white nationalism at the expense of its citizens and continue to cut education, cut research, cut healthcare, cut everything that makes society great, then yeah, at some point, probably within the next 20 years, the United States will definitely fall. Well, not fall, but our currency will no longer be the standard. They'll go to somebody else. Yeah, I think we're definitely heading on that route. That's why, going back to this affirmative action case, for those who want to run and jump and talk about anti-black this, all I'll say is, God forbid, if we get into any kind of military action with China, you are going to see that model minority jump right out the window, and they're going to put you right in the box with everybody else, the same way they did folks in 1940, because they're going to all of a sudden act like they can't trust none of y'all because they don't know who's here and who's an informant and so on and so forth. So be ready to see that kind of nonsense. So when you jump into the anti-black, white nationalist, white supremacy train, understand if you aren't white, you at some point will be collateral to that same system. It's just you got a longer shelf life before you end up going and pretty much seeing the Grim Reaper like everybody else. So play into that if you want to. Okay, can I go to bed now? Yeah, as far as Joe running, it's just pass the torch. I think personally, Joe ain't really my candidate, but I will definitely give him accolades to what he's been able to do with a lot of things in regards to the economy. There are some really great accomplishments that administration has done, but I think pass the torch. Just pass it. If you've already set it up and you know what you're doing and you can trust that there's another person that's going to be able to carry on and blah 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 blah, put the next person in. I just think at this point you're just being selfish. Like you're like, come on. I'm not trying to say he won't be here in 4 years because Joe might live to be 110. But it's like again for me, you have generations that are coming after you that will be the recipients of whatever policy and everything that you put into place. And sometimes these people can't relate to the later generations. There's a lot of things that he disconnects on. And it ain't just him, it's a lot of these candidates. Mitch McConnell needs to get up out of there. Trump doesn't need to run again. You know, I don't know why Christie thinks he needs to run. He doesn't need to run. Like most of these people don't need to run. I'm not going into politics because I'm about to go to bed. But yeah, I just do right by the people. That's all. Whoever gets up in there, please do right by the people. So we ain't got to deal with no nonsense. And on that note, this has been cool. This has been great. Yeah, like I said, book club Monday, podcast Sunday. Stay safe, stay sane. I hope this air is not terrible tomorrow. They got the company picnic outside tomorrow. I'm trying to find every reason to not go if that air is unhealthy. Anyway, I'm out. Good night. Share your 2 cents. And yeah, we'll catch up. I apologize if I did not get to cover all the topics I planned on covering. But you know, such is life. Anyway, I'm out. Good night.